Hello, 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 hello. Can you hear me? Can you hear me, America? Let me know if you can hear me. Let me know if you can see me. Let me know. Can you hear me? Can you see me? Give me a yes. Give me a no. Give me a yes. How's my audio? Good? Good. Apologies to the masses. We were trying a new program. Obviously, we need to figure out that program. So we're going to do that not live. We're going to try to figure out that program not live. But what that program can do, once we figure it out, is bring in Ty in person, on camera. We could also broadcast with that program on Facebook. So that's exciting. So we'll be live on Twitter, on Periscope, on Facebook, and all that. And it does some other stuff where Ty can actually operate the live stream where I don't have to, because right now I'm speaking to you, I'm operating the live chat, and, going back and forth between articles and video. So that's it. Sorry for that, and let's go. So, you know the drill. You got the checklist. Smash the like button. Let's get this video out to as many people as humanly possible. Smash it like it's the live stream we just did where you could barely hear me. Smash it like it's Nancy Pelosi telling you to eat your broccoli. Smash it like it's NBC and the rest of the corporate media trying to paint Tulsi Gabbard as a puppet of Russia. Smash it like your life depends on it. Become a status quo member. We're going to talk about that in a minute. Obviously, this is a super chat, and we're trying to raise money in our GoFundMe. Definitely, if you can, throw in a few bucks in the GoFundMe. Ty and I are hitting the road. Next week. We're going to Ohio, we're going to Detroit, and some other places. So we'll tell you more about that in a little bit. Michael, who's doing a fan of ours, who's doing our live chat, if you don't mind pumping in the GoFundMe link from time to time, I'll put it in right there, as well as the statusquo.com/join link. Remember, Status Quo is only going to grow as far as you take us. We're not taking money from Goldman Sachs. We're not taking meetings with big pharma or fossil fuel companies or big real estate developers or the very plutocrats destroying this country and planet. So you can become a member as low as $5 a month. Think about it, folks. Think about what you spend $5 on a day. Think about what you spend $10 on a week, $20 on a month. How much is independent journalism worth to you? Real independent journalism, not like independent journalism that calls itself independent but then goes out and takes money from the very plutocrats, giving to the Democrats, the Republicans, and destroying the planet. Independent media that actually goes out in the field. I just told you Ty and I are hitting the road again next week. We're going to cover the General Motors layoffs in Detroit, in Ohio. We're going to cover the lead crisis in Cleveland that you've probably not heard of. We're going to cover the water crisis in Detroit that you probably have not heard of. And probably a third story somewhere else. We're hitting the road, baby. Thanks to your contributions via GoFundMe and you guys becoming a member. But we don't want to stop just at this trip. We want to be able to continually go out. So $5 a month, $10 a month, $20 a month, or $147 a year, which actually saves you $93 on the $20 monthly. So instead of $20 monthly, you could do the $147 yearly, which saves you $93. I understand for those who are living paycheck to paycheck. I totally get it. If you can't, totally get it. But if you do have it in your budget, independent media is now more important than ever. And if you don't know, if you haven't seen by what the media is already doing to Tulsi Gabbard, if you haven't seen the propaganda the media is putting out there towards Bernie Sanders before he even announces, it's going to be more important than ever to have independent media to counter that propaganda. So, here we go. There's the GoFundMe link. Keep it coming in the GoFundMe. I know a lot of you have already contributed. If you can't, no problem. If you can, this is why I'm live on Sunday. This is why I'm working 7 days a week. This is why I do all these interviews during the week. If you missed the Jill Stein interview, we're going to air it. I'm going to post the Jill Stein interview in full. Okay? So, I forgot the rest. I forgot the rest of the checklist. Follow us at Status Quo on Twitter, at Jordan Chariton on Twitter. Twitter is unfortunately suppressing me too. I have so many followers that tell me, hey Jordan, are you still on Twitter? I'm like, yeah, I tweet all the time. Oh, I never see your tweets. Isn't that interesting? Have I been shadow banned? Subscribe to our podcast, bit.ly/Status Quo Podcast. We're turning these interviews, turning these live streams into podcasts because obviously a lot of people, don't only watch, but some people get Status Quo and other outlets in their commute to work or whatever it is. So all of these interviews and all that available on our podcast, and join our email list by going to statusquo.com. So I'm actually going to do it right away. I'm going to give you another great interview. So I interviewed Rania Khalek. She's an independent journalist. She is based in the Middle East, I believe. She has been tarred and feathered just like Tulsi Gabbard and just like others who have the audacity, the sheer audacity to say, hey, maybe we shouldn't be bombing all these other countries. Maybe we shouldn't be, trying to overthrow dictators in Venezuela. Maybe we shouldn't be trying to, take over the Middle East and take over all these other countries. Maybe that creates more terrorism. Maybe that creates more hatred for America. She's never on CNN. She's never on MSNBC. She's never quoted in the New York Times. And like Tulsi Gabbard, which I talked about in the beginning of this, the last live stream, she is being painted as a Russian stooge for simply saying Russia's not responsible for the United States problem, for simply saying get out of Syria, for simply saying get out of Yemen, for simply saying let's not be taking over Venezuela. I mean, we saw in the 1960s an anti-war movement for Vietnam. Now, anybody who is anti-Russia hysteria, anti a new Cold War, anti the U.S. helping Saudi Arabia commit genocide in Yemen, anti the U.S. being involved in Syria, anybody who says this is now being painted with a broad brush as sympathetic to Russia, as a Russian ally, or working with Russia. This is dangerous because it's what Noam Chomsky always talks about. This is how they manufacture consent. This is how, in this case, manufacturing discontent. So before I play the Rania Khalek interview, which I think is really, really good, 79 likes, 206 views. We got 206 people viewing, only 79 likes. The rest of you who haven't liked this live stream, I'm done with you. I dislike you if you don't like this live stream. Just kidding, I'm not done with you. But smash the like button. This is how we get the views up. This is how we work around Facebook and YouTube suppression. On YouTube, the more people that press the like button, even if you dislike me, just fake it, press the like button. The more people that press the like button, the more people that end up seeing the live stream. So it's super, super important that every single one of you watching, press the like button, even if you're casually listening. The other thing, I go live on Sunday. I spend most of Saturday preparing for the live stream on Sunday. I don't just go live and talk. It takes a lot of preparation, getting the articles together, getting the videos together, doing the interviews during the week. So if you have a couple bucks, keep it coming on the GoFundMe. Right now, we are at $41,140. So honestly, we've only raised $30 today. So, thank you to the people who have contributed, but I have a little higher ambitions. Ty and I are hitting the road this next week. He's coming here on Friday. Then we're driving to Ohio, then Detroit, and we might dip our toe into another state. I'm working on another story that we could travel on. So we're keeping our promise, baby. You GoFundMe, we get out there. And we need to raise a lot more money because we would like to cover in the field the Bernie Sanders campaign. We would like to cover in the field the Tulsi Gabbard campaign. We would like to cover Elizabeth Warren, and we would like to go and challenge Kamala Harris. Challenge Cory Booker. If you liked some of my coverage in 2016, if you like reporters being actual reporters and challenging the powerful, ask Donna Brazile how she feels about me. Hey, I'm just getting started. We just need the funding to be there and do this. And so if you have a couple bucks and you like the interviews, let us know. Without further ado, here's my interview with journalist Rania Khalek. Hey, it's Jordan. I am here with Rania Khalek. You are a wonderful, wonderful journalist, and you are definitely one of the Russian puppeteers, as the establishment like to call us. Those who dare ask for evidence and common sense. So, I don't know if you've seen this, but I just saw a Max Blumenthal video where he went into the halls of Congress, and it wasn't like one of those like ambush Fox News styles, but like he very nicely and casually was asking, the lawmakers huffing and puffing about Russian meddling. Are you for Venezuelan meddling? And I don't know what you thought. I thought it was just like priceless, their reaction. It was like seeing Casper the Friendly Ghost, because he was basically getting to a point that we have very selective double standards when it comes to anything done to our country, even minuscule. But as far as what we're doing in Venezuela, yeah, we have to do that. It's for human rights and all that jazz. What are your thoughts on the contradiction going on in coverage?
Well, first of all, with the Max's video, it was really good, but there was a couple takeaways that I had from it. One, it's kind of shocking when you see how uninformed members of Congress are. Like, some of them didn't really know what he was talking about. And that's kind of disturbing, because we're literally involved in a very dangerous destabilization campaign in a country that has a population of 30 million people. And there are members of Congress who are like, Venezuela, what? But also, yeah, the hypocrisy is completely on display here. I mean, all we've heard for the last 2-3 years, like endlessly on a loop, is Russian meddling, Russian meddling, Russian meddling over Facebook campaign ads, right? Some of them didn't even talk about the campaign, or like Twitter ads that nobody saw, or Instagram ads of like Bernie Sanders half naked or something that like apparently convinced people to vote for Donald Trump. The point is all we've heard is Russian election meddling. And regardless of like your take on whether Russia is responsible for Trump or not, I don't think he is, but let's say, even if that were true, I mean, it's just stunning that it just shows you not like the double standard of American arrogance. Like, we can just go around the world picking and choosing leaders whenever we want, but no one's allowed to touch us. Mm-hmm. It's unbelievable. And then also from Max's video, I think what was also interesting was that a lot of these lawmakers haven't even been asked about Venezuela.
Right.
So they were just kind of surprised he was even like, they were like, whoa, someone asked me about something no one else has. What? Mm-hmm. And again, that brings me back to, we're destroying a country of 30 million people. Like what the U.S. is doing, what the Trump administration is doing with bipartisan support is going to incite a civil war if it works, and it's going to collapse a country, and people are going to suffer already more than they have. And like, these members of Congress don't give a shit, or like don't even really know what's going on.
Mm-hmm. And I'd like to know what you think, because like we've seen in other regime change operations, there's a narrative that's been formed that all of a sudden the people are rising up, and just like, it took 30 minutes, but this guy Guaido, Bill Maher, what did he say? He's stepping up. But, reporting shows that this has been in the works for quite a while. I mean, Guaido went on a little Latin America tour to other countries to kind of manipulate this, and the U.S. and other countries coming together. It's been in the works to do this, so it doesn't seem to be this natural, organic protest against the Maduro government.
No, I mean, this has been in the works for more than a decade. Guaido is a part of a group of hand-selected people in Venezuela who have been trained by, various U.S. outfit-funded groups that receive funding from like the National Endowment for Democracy and USAID to basically train people in how to use protest movements to overthrow governments America doesn't like. And actually, Max Blumenthal, Dan Cohen wrote a really, really good investigative piece detailing, in clinical detail from start to finish, who Guaido is and where he comes from, and how the U.S., this is part of like a long strategy that's been taking place since 2005. The U.S. has been trying to overthrow the government in Venezuela since even before that, since Chavez was elected and became president in 1999. And for one reason only, it's because, and the U.S. wants to profit. U.S. companies want to profit off of and control that oil and other resources in Venezuela. It's a resource-rich country, and it elected a leader in the late 90s that nationalized the oil and took the national oil company and used those profits to fund social programs, right, instead of lining the pockets of elites. And that's a big no-no You're not allowed to do that. And so this is like, I mean, we know that George W. Bush tried to do this in 2002 and failed. And the U.S. never stopped. And so one thing that I find interesting is there's all this like, oh, look at Venezuela, it's proof socialism doesn't work. And it's like, no, Venezuela's proof that like you can sabotage socialism from working. But even while Venezuela had the most powerful country in the world trying to undermine and destabilize all its social programs for the last 2 decades, the country still managed to decrease malnutrition by half. Like they halved malnutrition. They built hospitals in poor areas, and like people for the first time. I mean, Venezuela has a huge population of poor people. That's how that country was for a long time. And for the first time, people had access to healthcare who never had access to healthcare. They had access to education, and illiteracy went down dramatically. There was many social gains in Venezuela, but of course you have a class of elites and oligarchs who, don't like having, some of their shit taken from them to be given to the poor. And so that's what you see in like any Latin American country that's ever tried to enact any sort of socialist policies, is the U.S. tries to undermine that by teaming up with the elites of that country. And that's what they've done in Venezuela. And they haven't been effective because Venezuela has this, has a lot of support for the Bolivarian Revolution, because so many people have benefited from it and they have something to lose. And so the point is that, what the U.S. is doing right now isn't just trying to replace Venezuela's government with a right-wing one that is, that is happy to comply with the U.S. corporate interests. But what they're actually trying to do, because they can't actually necessarily get those people into power, is they're trying to collapse the state, which is even more dangerous, because they'll cause a civil war. Because Venezuela, they have an army of loyalists that are happy to defend the government, and they will. And so if the U.S. starts arming and funding death squads, as I suspect they might, because Elliot Abrams, who's like Death Squad Abrams from the 80s, has been appointed as the envoy to Venezuela. If that's what the U.S. ends up doing, which it looks likely is going to happen, you're going to see a lot of bloodshed in Venezuela. And that brings me back to the members of Congress, is like, that's what's on the line here. And so it's really shocking to me that I can count on one hand the number of both people in the House of Representatives and the Senate who have spoken out against the U.S. meddling in Venezuela. And some of the statements haven't even been very good, but at least they're speaking out.
Mm-hmm. Elliot Abrams as the envoy to Venezuela is kind of like Dick Cheney as the envoy to Standing Rock. It's just incredible. But something that gets missed in all of this, and, Lee Camp and others pointed out with Syria, but it kind of goes in one ear and out the other, this is against international law. I mean, the United Nations has come out. I mean, I'll read you the quote. Coercion, whether military or economic, must never be used to seek a change in government in a sovereign state. The use of sanctions by outside powers to overthrow an elected government is in violation of all norms of international law. So how is the U.S. in one breath talking about democracy and all this jazz, but whatever you want to say, maybe Maduro's government hasn't been perfect economically, that's for sure, but they can't have any economic recovery if there's illegal, crippling sanctions. So it's kind of like you said, we're sabotaging any hopes they have economically.
And that's the point is to starve Venezuela and soften it up. I mean, this is like a part of an ongoing script we see happen over and over again. You can go down the list of the sort of order. It's like an orderly list of what the U.S. does in order to take out a government it doesn't like. Same thing applied to Syria, same thing applied to Libya, same thing applied to Iraq. I mean, in the 90s, there were crippling sanctions on Iraq, and they were actually even more dangerous because it wasn't just the U.S. that was enforcing sanctions. It was actually the UN. So you had like 500,000 children under the age of 5 in Iraq are estimated to have died because of these sanctions in the 90s. And at that time, actually, you had two senior officials of the UN resigned over the sanctions on Iraq. One of them even said they amounted to genocide. And actually, you have a kind of parallel taking place with Venezuela. You have a UN rapporteur to Venezuela last year, and he wrote a report on how U.S. sanctions in Venezuela were actually killing Venezuelans, right? It was limiting their access to food and to medicines, which is what sanctions do. I mean, when we talk about sanctions, they sound so neutral. They don't really sound violent. Like, sanctions doesn't make you think violence, but they're extremely violent in the way that the U.S. enforces them on other countries and cripples their economies. And this UN Special Rapporteur said, no one in the UN was even interested in his report. They completely ignored it because people, even in the UN, when it comes to Venezuela, are more interested in opening Venezuela's economy to capitalism and to corporate profit than they are in having a stable country that functions. And so you have that parallel with the sanctions, and Venezuela's been under sanction for a long time, but then you also have, the same thing happened. There's also another aspect of this, which is on top of sanctions, the U.S. likes to do this thing where it sort of helps fund and organize people in exile as like a sort of parallel government to the sovereign government that's recognized as like the legitimate government of the country. In the case of Venezuela, the guy is actually inside of Venezuela, Juan Guaido, and they declared him president, right? And have recognized him as president. They're trying to freeze the Venezuelan government's assets and actually give it to this guy. They actually did something really similar with Libya and with Syria, where they helped fund and form this opposition in exile government, and with Iraq, actually. There was an episode there that, that's what Ahmed Shalabi was in charge of. He was like the opposition government in exile that the U.S. recognized instead of Saddam Hussein. In Syria, you had them do it with like a, opposition government in exile based in Istanbul. And the same happened with Libya, with all these people outside of the country that they recognized. And so they try and freeze the assets and then transfer them to these opposition governments that they formed to try to actually use them to like fund rebels and fund arms. And so that's like another part of the regime change script, right? And then, you have, which is what happened with Syria and Libya, and what I'm now really concerned is going to happen with Venezuela, is the actual arming and funding of an insurgency inside the country. And that's what's extremely, extremely dangerous, because that's how you cause a civil war. And that's how you collapse a state. And that's why today in Libya, there are people being sold as slaves, because there's no functioning government, and you have a bunch of different militias and gangs that are fighting and feuding with each other and profiting off of anything they can, including the selling of humans. And in Syria, that worked in certain parts of the country. They collapsed the state, and you had the rise of ISIS. You had the rise of Al-Qaeda groups, and that was a disaster. And so now I'm really concerned about what we're going to see happen in Venezuela. And I don't know how you feel about this, Jordan, but like I was really happy to see some of these new members of Congress who are part of this like sort of new progressive wave speak out really vocally, especially Ilhan Omar. She's been great speaking out against this coup in Venezuela. But I've also been really disappointed because a few of those new members of Congress haven't said anything. And this, to me, is a moment that's comparable to the lead up to the Iraq War. And so if you're going to be if you're going to call yourself a progressive member of Congress, it's so easy to make a statement right now. It's not even under a Democratic president this is happening. It's happening under a Republican. It's happening under Trump. It's like so easy to oppose this. And I don't understand why some of them have still remained silent.
Well, I'm going to keep it real. Might get me in trouble, but I don't care. I mean, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez hasn't said anything. I think she retweeted someone, or Ro Khanna, she retweeted. But I mean, right now when she goes to the bathroom, it's national news. So you would think you would think she would be strong against this. Frankly, I thought Bernie Sanders' statement, although he said he was against regime change, he kind of had two.
It was wishy-washy.
Yeah,
it was like. I wasn't really sure what he was saying exactly.
Yeah, and also with the statement that, although Maduro's a dictator, this and that, well, whatever you think of Maduro, what is so different from Maduro than Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman? Or
actually, you know what? I think a lot, because I'll tell you this. You can say what you want about Maduro. You don't have to like the guy, but it's one of the biggest lies about Venezuela is that it's a dictatorship. I mean, you can say it about Syria. Syria's a dictatorship. You can say it about Libya. That was a dictatorship. But Venezuela has so many elections on both the local and national level. Maduro was elected last year in elections. Millions of people, 10 million people voted for the guy. Again, you don't have to like him. You don't have to say he's perfect. You can criticize all you want his policies. But it's from like all across the spectrum, or I should say the corporate media, has labeled it a dictatorship and labeled him a dictator is just so laughable and absurd to me. I was just watching like Vice. Vice did a report from out of Caracas interviewing Juan Guaido. The guy's still in Caracas. Like, he is funded and has been recognized by an enemy government as the president of this country, right? They're trying to push for him to be the president to help collapse the state. And he's walking around free, giving public speeches and interviews to international media that hates Maduro. Like, that's not the behavior of a dictatorship.
Well,
it's just so absurd to me.
I'll also point out to you, and Ben Norton pointed this out, but Maduro agreed to move up the election by a year. So that's usually, you think Trump's going to be like, yeah, we'll just do it this year since a lot of people are unhappy. I mean, that's not a dictator. But I think I can't get in Bernie Sanders' mind, but it seems to me that a lot of people in Washington, even though they're against the idea of regime change, they're very, very focused on the domestic side and don't want to dip their toe into other countries. But when you think of terrorism, what better recruitment for ISIS, Al-Qaeda, or other splinter groups than us continuing to go into other countries, whether it's Latin American, Muslim, you name it. I mean, and what you were pointing out, these rebel groups, well, in Syria, some of these rebel groups were Al-Qaeda. So who the hell knows who we're emboldening in Latin America right now? The other thing is, the United States is sitting here, Maduro's a dictator. Well, the United States has pretty much, with a wink and a nod, been totally fine with this literal fascist in Brazil, who is, I think this Brazilian, Bolsonaro, was tweeting out emojis mocking a homosexual lawmaker that resigned in Brazil out of fear. And he was basically trolling this person. So we are fine with him. We are fine with bin Salman, which, by the way, extends to Obama. But when we are not fine with the quote-unquote dictators sitting on top of oil. Of
course, that's not dictating what we want them to.
Right.
And, it's good that you mentioned the sort of blowback, because when it comes to Latin America, part of the blowback, unlike the Middle East, where the blowback has come in the form of Islamic extremism and like Al-Qaeda and ISIS, the blowback in Latin America has, I don't know if you'd call it blowback, but it does impact American domestic politics. I understand lawmakers being more focused on domestic policy. That just makes sense. But for a lot of lawmakers, the issue of anti-immigrant sentiment is very important. The issue of refugees is very important. And I really wish that they could make the connection between U.S. policies in Latin America and refugees at the border. Because 2009, the U.S. participated in helping to overthrow the government in Honduras. Hillary Clinton really spearheaded that from the U.S. side. There was a democratically elected leader who was like left of center, and he was pushed out of power in a military coup that the U.S. immediately recognized. And Honduras has since descended into chaos. You have a right-wing government in Honduras that is authoritarian, that kills environmental activists, and that dishes out so much violence on top of like the criminal gangs in Honduras that are allowed to like do their thing as they please, to the point where it sent people fleeing from the country. And back in 2014, at the height of at the peak of like, you had unaccompanied children coming across the border and being detained. At the peak of all that, I believe a third of those children were from Honduras. And no one ever, and at the time, I remember Hillary Clinton, who had spearheaded that policy of regime change in Honduras, made some really crass comment about we need to send a message to their parents to stop sending their children here. After she played such a massive role in destabilizing that country. That's why people are fleeing in the first place. But the point is that moments like that actually fuel the far right in the U.S. Trump, one of his biggest issues he campaigned on was anti-immigrant sentiment, anti-refugee sentiment. And now, he's still doing it. He's talking about building a wall to keep people out. Well, people fleeing their homelands because of U.S. policy is what helps fuel that sentiment. And we need to make that connection, especially people like Bernie Sanders. Like, that connection needs to be made. And so right now, what we're seeing happen in Venezuela could precipitate a massive refugee crisis where you see another wave of people fleeing violence for the U.S. And then you once again see it fuel the far right and higher domestic agenda of anybody who seeks to push, progressive or socialist policies in the U.S. Like we just saw with this government shutdown over a wall.
Right. I'd like to ask you, because obviously it's Trump, increasing the temperature here. But, Obama used terms like the troika of tyranny and a lot of,
Did he really?
Yeah. And in Syria, I don't know if it was Obama, but his administration. And, you have in Syria, it started under Obama. A lot of these things started under Democrats. and now you have the Republicans continuing. So then Democratic establishment people are all perplexed when progressives say, well, there's not that big of a difference. I mean, one party is Republican light, the other one's extreme batshit crazy. They all worship at the altar of the military-industrial complex. The only difference is one is like, you know, cool with women doing what they want with their bodies and aren't for an outright ban. But from what I see, the Democrats are fairly complicit in what's going on in Venezuela.
Absolutely. And Nancy Pelosi came out and recognized the leader that Trump pushed to do a coup in Venezuela, Mike Pence, I should say. This is a complete bipartisan policy. And even before Trump was president, when Obama was in office, you saw, like I mentioned earlier, the U.S. has been helping to orchestrate and fund this extreme right opposition in Venezuela for over a decade now. And under Obama, you saw these far right protesters start engaging in violent protests where they actually lynched people. They lynched a few people for suspecting that they were Chavistas just because they had dark skin. This was taking place, and of course we don't know this because our media doesn't report on it. Our media whitewashes anything anti-Maduro as a good thing, every protest, and it just blames all the deaths on the government when actually there's a lot more going on here. But the point is that under Obama, that policy of destabilization was still ongoing. Trump is he just continued with it. And to be fair, yes, he did put John Bolton and Marco Rubio have really been in charge of the policy on Venezuela, especially Marco Rubio. So it may be a little more in your face than it might be under someone like Obama or maybe Clinton. But at the same time, it's still the same policy. And it's something that all Democrats are supporting, except for, like I mentioned, literally 5 people I can list on one hand.
And not to interrupt you, but John Bolton literally went on Fox News acknowledging that we're doing this for oil.
I want everybody to know we're looking at all this very seriously. We don't want any American businesses or investors caught by surprise. They can see what President Trump did yesterday. We're following through on it.
So if you think of a company like Citgo, which is owned by PDVSA, which is the state-run oil company there in Venezuela, we have a lot of those Citgo assets right here in the U.S. Is that something, for example, sir, that you're looking at?
Yeah, well, we're in conversation with major American companies now that are either in Venezuela or, in the case of Citgo, here in the United States. I think we're trying to get to the same end result here. Venezuela is one of the 3 countries I call the troika of tyranny. It'll make a big difference to the United States economically if we could have American oil companies really invest in and produce the oil capabilities in Venezuela. It'd be good for the people of Venezuela. It'd be good for the people of the United States. We both have a lot at stake here, making this come out the right way.
He's
right. That's something interesting too. Is that is something that you see under a Trump administration because they're really in your face, open about what they're doing. You definitely wouldn't see that under Obama. It would be much more about human rights and democracy. Whereas, John Bolton is just straight up we're there for the oil.
Right.
Right. We're here. We're there. We're coming for your oil.
And also, I want to get back to the human toll, because the sanctions we're doing in Venezuela are stopping medicine, food from coming in. Our support for Saudi Arabia, there's ports being blocked to get critical medicine, food, you name it, to Yemen. We're essentially, through whether it's refueling Saudi Arabia planes midair to the blockades I just talked about, and now this, what do you call that other than assisting genocide? It might not be that route yet in Venezuela, but we are assisting all that while crying about Russian trolls on the internet. The cognitive dissonance here, it seems like there's only a small crowd of people who understand this, and the rest are either intentionally blind or, like you said from that Max Blumenthal video, kind of not knowledgeable.
Yeah, I think that people are really, I would say even people on the progressive left, unfortunately, not everyone, but a good portion of people just are kind of pretending it's not happening, what we're doing in Venezuela. Yemen's definitely been getting a lot more attention, especially since the death of Khashoggi. But at the same time, I think that people are deeply uncomfortable, even people who are progressives, with the idea of, the reality, which is the U.S. around the world behaves like a global dictator. It's a bully. The U.S. is a bully. It's an empire. We have over 1,000 military bases in every corner of the globe. And that's how we project our power in really violent ways, whether it's economic violence or whether it's actual military violence. And we, topple governments, we destroy and collapse states, and we bomb. I mean, we sell the most arms in the world. That makes people deeply uncomfortable. There is a huge military industrial complex. There is intelligence agencies involved in trolling. Like, that's a thing that happens. And reputational assault. There are think tanks that are connected to the State Department, that are connected to, the CIA in some cases, that really do participate in assaulting and smearing your credibility and reputation if you speak out on these issues. And you can just look at any person in a position of power who has spoken out. They are immediately bombarded with attacks from mainstream journalists who are basically like neocon mouthpieces, who will immediately call them pro-dictator. And they are immediately just like overwhelmed with an insane level of hate on social media, a lot of which is coming from like accounts that I mean, maybe some of them are real, but I think some of them are really part of a troll farm.
Right.
And so it really like disincentivizes people from speaking out on these issues.
Right.
Because yes, you do get trolled and people do speak out against you for talking about raising the tax rate, which is a great policy and it should happen, like a marginal tax rate. But it is nothing compared to the level of attack that comes your way when you speak out against U.S. regime change wars, because you are poking holes and challenging the biggest forces on the planet when you do that, especially if you're a person in a position of power. Well, which is why. Go ahead.
I mean, also look at it. I mean, Google has contracts with U.S. intelligence. Jeff Bezos, I just found out yesterday, I guess I was behind, is sitting on a board at the Pentagon. I mean, Amazon is getting a big fat contract with the Pentagon on top of their contract with the CIA. I mean, it's all just one. Like, it's worse than the movie than 1984, the book. It's just like it's one.
And it's so much more sophisticated. Like, it's so much more. It's so much more sophisticated. And right now, I think we're experiencing something really dangerous, because at a time when all of this sort of information warfare, I guess, by like all these different forces is becoming better and more sophisticated to be used even for domestic consumption in the U.S. You have a moment where, because of Trump and because of the whole Russia investigation, all of these liberals and even progressives who would otherwise be maybe historically skeptical of our intelligence agencies, now revere them because of Trump. And so it just feels like a really dangerous Orwellian moment where like people have just kind of lost their minds. Well, and you can't have a rational conversation about any of this.
I also think there's danger for you, because I mean, I just saw, I don't know his name, but there was somebody on Twitter. He posted a video of Kamala Harris basically giggling about going after mothers who were, truancy. Yeah. And his account got suspended. It's like, if enough people report you, you're suspended. I mean, why? For posting a video of a presidential candidate acting questionably in her policy? I mean, we're seeing, I don't agree with all of them, but we're seeing accounts deplatformed on Patreon, on YouTube, on all these platforms. And I don't know how much you want to get into it. Your Wikipedia has been attacked recently for questioning. And by the way, your questioning and my questioning and Jimmy Dore's questioning, I don't want to do a preemptive victory lap here, but questioning on Russia is beginning to bear a little fruit, because, they're running out of people to indict here, but I still don't see this master plan. Can you kind of talk about that? Like, you were talking personally, you've been under some serious attack.
Yeah, it was. I did a video. I do videos for In the Now, and I did a video on Venezuela that did pretty well. I mean, like, it doesn't go as viral as perhaps like more mainstream stuff does. But for somebody questioning what is essentially a coup in Venezuela, it went pretty viral. And as soon as that happened, I just was bombarded with like an insane amount of hate, which I'm kind of used to getting for other issues I speak out on. But then it suddenly became an issue of like, there was people trying to change my Wikipedia page. Have one is literally the first thing that shows up on Google if somebody Googles your name. And so they changed it so the first line said something insane like, this isn't a direct quote, but it was like, Rania Khalek is a Lebanese-American journalist who's been described as anti-Semitic and pro-Kremlin and pro-Assad and and just like every pro and anti you can think of that just makes somebody sound like a terrible human being.
Well, I'm a Jew, and you're very nice to me, so.
Well, thank you.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
shoot, I didn't know you were. That changes everything.
Yeah.
No, but the point is, I mean, the attacks were insane because it was like somebody would go in and edit it back, and then someone else would come in and edit it back. Like there was a coordinated effort to try and smear to try and libel me in my Wikipedia page. That's the first thing you see when you enter my name. And that's like nothing compared to, I think, what people in Congress get. Like Ilhan Omar spoke out on Venezuela, and she was like attacked viciously. Tulsi Gabbard is constantly being called all kinds of names. And again, you don't have to love everything about these Congress people, but they're being attacked specifically for this reason. Like Tulsi Gabbard is constantly called, Assad's best friend in office, and Putin's best friend because she was like pro-peace in Syria, and against arming, jihadists. And then speaking out on Venezuela, she's now being called, they call you pro-dictator immediately. And so, yeah, the level of hate, it's very coordinated. It's not just random or organic. It's very, very, very coordinated, especially when it's coming from like a cabal of mainstream media journalists who seem to always be, available to jump on Twitter to like immediately smear anyone who has a certain opinion that they don't like on foreign relations.
Right. And I'd like to ask you, the drip on Russia. I mean, I can't. I don't even want to get into Rachel Maddow's like hysterical. I was going to ask you if you're part of the secret global plot to starting from Russia to take advantage of the polar vortex here and just shut down.
I was, but then they shut that down as soon as Rachel Maddow exposed it. They were like, "Oh fuck, abort!"
I mean, it's Rachel Maddow's she's making Glenn Beck back in his like red phone days on Fox News look pretty sane. But what I see, honestly, is every indictment that comes out, a lot of these people committed crimes for various reasons, but I don't see this conspiracy because when I was on the campaign trail, the original charge here was that the Trump campaign knowingly worked with Russia to get those emails and give them to WikiLeaks. That was the original thing Hillary Clinton's campaign manager said, and all of them were putting out there. And the goalpost has moved now to like, Roger Stone might have tried to get early access to WikiLeaks. It just seems to me like you can in one breath say, all right, Trump had some sleazy people around him. They were trying to dig up dirt. If WikiLeaks had already made it public that they had stuff on Clinton, so they were trying to get it. But it seems to me that, it's really a huge letdown, unless Mueller has some smoking gun that he's been holding. But at that point, you would think if he has something that's so damaging, you would think he would have released it by now. What are your thoughts on where we're at in this Russiagate?
Well, it's been like more than 2 years. Has it been more than 2 years, or has it been exactly 2 years? It's been like 2 years of nonstop, like it's coming, and it's always nothing. And then like every time the media like freaks out and gets really excited, it's immediately debunked. I personally don't. I like my eyes glaze over when I can't even follow it at this point. Like the different theories about Russia and Trump collusion, like they become so far-fetched, involving so many different names, and like this person spoke to this person maybe on the phone at this time and date. Oh wait, it didn't happen. That like I really do have a hard time following it. I imagine a lot of Americans do. Like, and it just seems like this weird, boring reality TV show where nothing ever actually happens. Like people like Aaron Mate follows it so closely. I don't know how he's able to.
I'm beginning to worry for his mental health. I
know. But he really does. Like he's kind of like one of my go-to. Like I'm like I have no fucking clue what's going. Oh, sorry, I don't know if I curse.
Yeah.
Okay, I have no fucking clue what's going on right now. I just go look at what Aaron Mate is saying. And it's usually it's always right. And I really do I don't know how these people monitor the Russiagate story, because it's changed, like you said, so much that it's just like impossible to follow. And average Americans don't care,
right?
Because it's like people life is hard. People can't. People are just like trying to pay their bills and not go bankrupt, and like trying to pay their student debt, and like no one has time to sit down all day following the new theories about Russiagate. And in the end, I feel like it's such a waste of time because Trump is a really corrupt individual, and it seems like there's so many other avenues to actually find ways to attack him. And I don't know if to impeach him, but to definitely to attack him, that like the focus on Russia just seems like a waste of time. And I'm like, again, like I said, my eyes just glaze over. Like I can't even follow the theories anymore. I just feel like everyone's gone insane.
Yeah. Last question, domestically. You know, it seems to me, I mean, Cory Booker just announced today, so now we have that darling of Wall Street who's pretending to be progressive. But it seems to me, I mean, the media is really, really coming together for one Kamala Harris. I mean, CNN had a love fest for her, which was very adoring, left out some key questions like, why did you prosecute Steve Mnuchin? It seems like there's, you know, a lot of the Hillary Clinton wing kind of coming together for her now. They weren't for Medicare for all when Bernie was proposing it, but they suddenly like Kamala Harris, maybe because they know she's not serious about it.
Well, she's already kind of walking it back, too.
Right, exactly.
But anyways, continue, yeah.
Yeah, I'd love to know what you think, because to me, I mean, it's sacrosanct. As a journalist, you can't even say anything about Kamala Harris. You're racist, you're sexist, and all that. But it seems to me that they are saying this she's in the Senate for 2 years, which is fine. She hasn't done much in the Senate, but that's fine. But she should be president because she speaks well and she's all about inclusiveness. And let's not look at her calling Wall Street. Let's not look at her taking a lot of money from Wall Street. And let's not look at her moonwalking in 24 hours from like Medicare for all. That's it. It seems like they're to borrow from Chomsky. It seems like they're manufacturing consent for Kamala Harris.
Totally. And I mean, even Hillary Clinton seems to have gotten behind her. A lot of Clinton's people are involved in her campaign. And I think you're seeing what the DNC did last time, which is they're trying to anoint someone. I think they're going to have a much more difficult time than they did in 2016 because Bernie Sanders is a force to be reckoned with. I mean, he's not some obscure politician anymore. He's a household name. He has name recognition. The people he struggled with in 2016 because they just didn't know who he was, are people that he does well with now, like Black and Latinos, like Black people and Latinos, like Bernie Sanders now. He has really high approval ratings from them. I don't think it's going to be a cakewalk for whoever the DNC anoints. And if anything, I'm really happy that Cory Booker made his announcement for his candidacy. I think that the more establishment candidates they try to run, the more it'll split the vote for those guys. That's how, I mean, maybe I'm wrong to think that, but I do believe because Cory Booker and Kamala Harris are pretty much cutouts of each other in many ways in terms of the policies that they endorse. They have a lot of the same fan base, which is like hedge fund managers. Yeah. and so, and also the people who want to vote for Kamala Harris or Cory Booker are pretty much like it'll split the Hillary Clinton wing of the party. Right. And I think that's a good thing. I mean, I'm really, really excited and interested to see how things are going to go for this next election. What I'm worried about, though, is we were speaking about Russiagate earlier. I think a lot of progressive politicians, including Bernie Sanders, unfortunately, have played into that narrative of, the Russiagate narrative. And I think what you're going to see happen is you're going to see all of that apparatus that's been pushing Russiagate turn on Bernie Sanders, much the same way it's turned on Jeremy Corbyn in the UK, where they try and say that Jeremy Corbyn is like a Putin plant. They've already started trying to say that about Bernie Sanders in the most absurd ways. But you have a population in the U.S. that's now been conditioned to see Russia as the boogeyman behind everything bad. I don't know how well that will work, but it's going to be unfortunate to see that used against Bernie Sanders when he's actually kind of endorsed that narrative against other people. And I hope it doesn't work, but we'll see what happens. But I really think that's going to be their go-to way to attack Bernie Sanders is like, oh, he was in the Soviet Union in 1988 singing "This Land Is Your Land." And that's when they recruited him into the KGB. And that's when he decided to run for president twice. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know. I hope that sounds so absurd. I hope it doesn't work, but who knows? Right. But as for I think that it's definitely a different time than 2016. Bernie Sanders has a huge and energized base. I really hope he announces soon. I'm still like rah Bernie. I mean, he's not all his policies are my favorite, but as far as domestic policy is concerned, like, I don't think there's any other way to go. Yeah. And I lied. One more question. Go for it. I'm always curious, like, you're not based in the U.S. Are people looking at the U.S. now, like, even worse than they used to look? Because when I was in Germany 2 years ago, people were just like, oh, my God, you guys, not just because of Trump, just because, like, I mean, Like we don't have healthcare.
You're shooting each other up every day, and you have no health care, and now the border, now separating children at the border. Like, I'm curious what people you come across think of America.
So obviously I'm in a different part of the world. I'm in like the Middle East, which views America differently than perhaps Europe does. Mm-hmm. I think European countries, like you said, like if you're in Germany, that's kind of the thing you get is like you guys are shooting each other up and there's refugees at the border. People in places like the Middle East, I think, are a little bit more like. Obviously not everyone has the same opinion, but they're a little bit. They're shocked when they hear there's shootings in the U.S. They're like, why that doesn't even happen here? Like, there's not mass shootings in the Middle East. How is there mass shootings there? But for them, it's more like, what's the U.S. going to do to us?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Which is something that Europe doesn't have to really worry about so much, unless you're like in Greece or something. I don't know, but and for a lot of people in the Middle East, especially like more progressive-minded people. They're kind of like, well, Trump has kind of been good for us because he just kind of states things openly, unlike other Democratic presidents might, who are much smoother talkers. And he's not very good at intervening. Mm-hmm. Like, he doesn't do a very good job. He ends up failing. And also right now is a moment where the U.S. is actually pulling out of the Middle East, or at least Trump is trying to. They definitely have pulled back. Like in Syria, they've already started to pull back. They're talking about pulling back in Afghanistan. So, people aren't, it depends which country you're in, but like people are kind of just like, Trump's the same for us, Mm-hmm. Like, it hasn't made much of a difference. Doesn't matter if there's like a Republican or president in office for people in the Middle East. People in Iran, on the other hand, I think Trump's been really awful for them. So I guess it also matters which country you're talking to.
Yeah.
But they definitely do look at the U.S. and they're just like, I've had people ask me before, like, why do your police shoot people? like I actually have had more that's happened on more than one occasion where people are just like, why do your cops do that? Like, they don't even do that here.
Right.
And why do people like kill each other? Why are there mass shootings in your country? That's always weirded people out. But like the refugee crisis in the U.S. or like the issue at the border, that doesn't really surprise anyone in the Middle East because the U.S. hasn't exactly been a pleasant force in this part of the world.
So the whole
it's not surprising.
So our whole spreading democracy thing that didn't work out. Got it.
Yeah, no, not really. No, not at all. Not even a little bit.
Oh boy. Well, I appreciate you taking the time. I love your videos, by the way. If I wasn't so naturally long-winded, I wish I could do those cool, snappy viral videos. So we'll be in touch soon. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Jordan.
Take care.
So that was Rania Khalek, a great journalist. She's not based in America, so maybe that's why she has some sanity. Maybe. Always love her work. And let me show you where you could find her. Give me a minute. Boo, 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 boo. She is at Rania Khalek on the Twitter. That's her first name and her last name right there. So you should definitely check her out. She is, unfortunately, you hear Rania only on my network, on RT sometimes, unfortunately, you hear her only on RT, on me, on other independent channels. You don't really hear her often in corporate media because they're definitely afraid of the narrative of anti-interventionism, anti-imperialism. The United States isn't super duper awesome. They're afraid of that, so they don't want to do it. They don't want to feature people like her. They don't want to have Jill Stein on unless it's to hammer over the head and complain she's a Russian, or Ben Norton, or Lee Camp, or Jimmy Dore, or myself, and the list goes on and on and on. So appreciate Rania coming on, and I wanted to show you a video that we mentioned in the interview. We should have edited in to the interview, but I want to show you a clip from Max Blumenthal This was so unbelievably enlightening. So unbelievably enlightening. Are you ready for this? This is Max Blumenthal at the halls of Congress asking Congresspeople, including Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, by the way, who didn't answer, are we meddling in Venezuela? Why are we meddling in Venezuela? Here we go.
Is meddling in Venezuela?
I don't think so. I mean, we're the superpower in the world.
Part of the Russian agenda is to undermine democracy, not just in our country, but in other countries as well.
Do you think it would be meddling if Russia were to declare Nancy Pelosi the president of the U.S.?
I haven't thought about that. She's not president of the United States, I'll tell you that.
It's a pretty desperate situation over there, yeah.
So we should be meddling, is what you're saying.
The problem is when you meddle, you cause locals to rebel against that, so it's a tough call.
Maduro's troops or goons went into the ghetto and decided they were going to take over.
Isn't he the president of the country? I mean,
Yeah.
Those are his security forces.
Well, perhaps.
Do you think the U.S. is meddling in Venezuela?
Are they meddling? Yeah, both sides are meddling.
But it's good meddling, is what you're saying.
I don't
We should
know if
meddle.
it's good meddling or not.
I mean, any comment on the situation in Venezuela?
Oh, goodness gracious. As far as Venezuela is concerned, I think they did have a coup down there.
Yeah.
So, but what I'd like to see, yes, oh, I'm sorry, I got to go.
It is a coup.
Yeah, to me, when you have something like that happen, I think we got to do something about it, but I'm so sorry, I got to go. Okay, thanks.
Would I classify it as a coup? What's
Yeah.
happening? I wouldn't classify it as a coup.
How would you classify
I'll tell
it?
you what. I'd rather be interviewed from a position of fact,
Okay.
rather than innuendo or opinion, especially since I just missed the briefing, which was just a couple hours ago.
Do you think the U.S. is meddling in Venezuela's political system?
I think we're just supporting the people and supporting what they are deciding needs to happen, and so I think that's good for us since we are the bastion of freedom to speak up and support other people around the world who are crying for freedom as well.
Well, I think we need to protect the Mueller Commission.
Yeah.
Make sure the Mueller Commission report is a public report.
On the issue of meddling, do you think the U.S. is meddling in Venezuela right now in their political system? Do you think Trump is running a coup there? Do you think John Bolton and Rubio are running a coup?
I don't know. I think there's something now that gives, Maduro awesome.
Any comment on the situation in Venezuela? Do you think what's happening there is a coup?
Okay, I got to go with Josh here. Venezuela is not a good situation right now, and
Do you think the
what's
U.S. is
going on?
meddling there? And any comment on the situation in Venezuela? Do you think it's a coup?
No.
Any comment on the situation in Venezuela?
We're working on something.
No comment, my friend. Good to see you all.
Thank you.
Been a pleasure.
It's really not my portfolio.
The fact is that Venezuelans are starving today in an oil-rich country.
So do you support the sanctions, which will hurt ordinary people?
Yeah, I'm not going to take the bait.
Okay, do you support the sanctions?
I'm done. Adios.
Do you support the sanctions?
Adios. Yes, I support these.
Wouldn't that hurt ordinary people?
I think we need sometimes to demonstrate that Mr. Maduro has hurt ordinary people every single day.
By sanctioning the entire country's economy, seizing its assets?
Let me say this about U.S. relationships in Central and South America and the Caribbean. It is something that we should not be proud of. I mean, I look at the way this country has treated Haiti for over 200
Aristide
years.
was an ally of Hugo Chavez in Venezuela, Jean-Bertrand Aristide. Do you see this as a continuation of that policy of kind of neo-colonialism?
Oh, for sure. Even with Cuba.
Yeah.
We've had an embargo on Cuba since 1959. This is tragic.
Right. So do you think we should
they
embargo
are 90 miles off our coast.
Right. So should we embargo Venezuela the same way?
Absolutely not.
Right.
Why? Because then the population will suffer more.
Right.
No, I don't agree with that.
So are you going to speak up on that because you clearly know
Sir,
what's happening?
that's not my issue.
Okay.
My issue is financial services.
All right.
That's what I do.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
You know what's the most like unbelievable about that? I mean, of course, there's the corruption. I mean, all of these people, they're just corrupt. And hey, you know what? You got to call out progressives too. I like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. I like her policies. I like her tweets. I like what she stands for. I think she's done a lot of great things so far as a congresswoman. But she's basically silent on this. In that video, Max Blumenthal asked her, do you think the U.S. is meddling? And she basically, maybe she was busy, maybe she was running to another thing, but she basically said, oh, we're working on a comment. We're working on a comment. Well, how long do you need to make a comment? I'm not trying to be unfair to her because I happen to like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. I think she's done great things so far as a congresswoman. It seems she's going to be very soon introducing a Green New Deal legislation. She's working on it with Massachusetts Senator Edward Markey. But, I mean, the facts are the facts. She knows what's going on in Venezuela, as far as I could see. And again, correct me if I'm wrong, if she said something stronger, but all she has done is retweet Congressman Ro Khanna, who has come out strongly against this. I don't remember seeing her making her own statement on the U.S.'s efforts to essentially topple the democratically elected Venezuelan government. So, you know, progressives are not beyond criticism. Purple Nurple, she's doing research. I mean, it's taken a while for research. I mean, it's a pretty clear-cut situation. You know, he's democratically elected. And by the way, this is what we always do when we're trying to topple a democratically elected leadership. We say the elections aren't fair, they rigged the election, they weren't democratically elected, and then we put in whatever puppet we want, in this case, Juan Guaido. I agree. Max is doing what journalists should be doing. So I'm not attacking Ocasio-Cortez, but I am saying, speak up. Right now, if Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez goes to the bathroom, it's national news. So if she were to speak up on this, it would be national news. And you could get this into the mainstream. But so far, I mean, I've seen new Congresswoman Omar from Minnesota. She's been strong about this. Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard, now running for president, has been strong about this. Who else? Ro Khanna has been strong about this. Bernie Sanders has not been strongly outspoken against this. He's kind of said, well, Maduro's a dictator, but we shouldn't do regime change. Well, you can't do both. And I know what I know what I don't know. I'm not from Venezuela, but from what I could see, he was democratically elected twice. And he, as a dictator, agreed to move the election up 1 year early. The election was supposed to be this year in Venezuela. He allowed it to happen last year. You think Donald Trump, because people wanted an earlier election, would be like, yeah, let's do it this year? So, you know, politicians aren't going to do what we want 24/7, but they should, you know, it's okay if Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez doesn't come out for every single thing you want. Same thing with Ro Khanna, same thing with Tulsi Gabbard. There is no perfect politician. Sometimes they're against things they should be for because they're not informed, or they make political calculations that they shouldn't. So I'm not like saying you have to be for what we want 24/7, everything. But you should be morally courageous when it's called for. And in this case, it's called for. Not just because the people of Venezuela are the victims of this imperialism, this insanity, but the people of the United States are also the victims. Because when we continue to basically topple other countries and spend all this money on other countries and to invade other countries and steal their oil, that's more schools not built here. That's more excuses that we can't have Medicare for all. That's more excuses that we can't have free public college. That's more excuses that we can't end private prisons. That's more excuses that we can't have a Green Deal. We don't have the money. Thank you, Osama Kasem, $5 in the super chat. Hey, Jordan, Jake Tapper did a video 3 days ago smearing Medicare for all. It has minus 500 likes to 1.5 thousand dislikes. No one is buying the BS. Check it out. Very good segue because I'm doing a segment on Medicare for all next. So thank you. But what do you expect, Osama? You think Jake Tapper's going to tell the truth about Medicare for all? Please. While he sits there in his $10,000 suit enjoying his very, very good health care from CNN? Please. But it's not just these idiot congressmen. Our friend Rachel Maddow is back at it. Our friend Rachel Maddow is back out. So WikiLeaks had tweeted out basically mocking her ridiculous segment where Rachel Maddow is literally speaking with people to find out if it's possible that during the U.S.'s polar vortex, which saw temperatures at minus 20, minus 30 in some cases in the Midwest, Rachel Maddow just had to pose the question: could Russia take down the U.S.'s electricity grid during our polar vortex to kill millions of people? Best journalism you could buy. So Rachel Maddow is now like trolling WikiLeaks basically to defend her ridiculous propaganda and McCarthyism. Oh, are you mad? Then she says, unclassified Director of National Intelligence report this week says for the first time that China and Russia can cut portions of the U.S. electrical grid or power supply at will. So Rachel Maddow is basically admitting right there she's just a stenographer for the U.S. intelligence agencies. She's not going to look into any of those reports. She's just going to breathlessly regurgitate the fear-mongering from the Director of National Intelligence. MSNBC, who once had Phil Donahue, who once had Keith Olbermann, who once actually was somewhat progressive and questioned the intelligence in Iraq and questioned the FBI and the CIA, are now, honestly, what's the difference between MSNBC and Rachel Maddow and, like, Sean Hannity? What's the difference? What's the difference between MSNBC's Rachel Maddow and, like, Washington Post columnists? They all just breathlessly repeat what the CIA, the FBI, intelligence, Homeland Security, you name it, tell them. This is McCarthyism. We interviewed a Wall Street Journal energy reporter about it Wednesday night, which caused RT, Sputnik, and WikiLeaks to freak out about our coverage. Yeah, so you're not actually interviewing these people because there's a real threat. You're interviewing these people to scare the living hell out of your audience, because that's what's giving you such ratings, because your audience is generally older Americans. That's cable news. I think 2 years ago I saw CNN's the youngest at 58. And I'm not knocking old people, because older people watch me, and older people are progressive. So I'm not saying all old people watch cable news. I'm giving you the data. Cable news's audience is older. And Rachel Maddow, what she's doing, and she knows she's doing it, is playing on that old Cold War sentiment. That old Cold War, the Kremlin's coming for you. They're going to steal your children. They're going to, get into your water. They're going to do everything. Here's the segment that got them so excited, if you're curious. And here's the DNI report. It's the stuff on pages 5 and 6 that makes them so mad, so mad. I mean, Rachel Maddow has lost her fucking mind. So Max Blumenthal writes back, like a sane person, like a credible journalist, if you don't feel any shame for performing embarrassing war propaganda night after night, can you at least feel some for cynically misleading your viewers, frightening them unnecessarily, and contributing massively to the dumbing down of our culture? Oh, Max, do you think Rachel Maddow is all that concerned about the wisdom or the dumbing down of our culture? 30,000 a day. Thank you, Big G. I'd love to make $30,000 a day. Steve Smith, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is the people's congressman. Be patient, Jordan. Steve, I agree with you. I like her. I'm not attacking her, but we can't be as progressives or as status quo viewers, sitting here with pom-poms for politicians. I don't care if they're progressive or not. So, would you say be patient if it came to Kamala Harris, who hasn't said anything about Venezuela? You got to hold progressives to the same standard you hold centrist Democrats. Because if you hold progressives like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez to a different standard than, say, Kamala Harris, guess what? That's giving Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, not her in particular, but progressives like her, license to start shifting a little bit closer to the center, to start ducking the next time moral courage is needed. So I'm in the middle. I'm not attacking Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. I'm not saying she's not great 99% of the time. But let's be honest. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is a smart congresswoman. She knows what's going on. She's well-researched. She's well-educated. She knows what's going on. So, yes, maybe she needs time to, look closer in to the situation. But you don't need weeks and weeks and weeks to make a public statement. Sorry. And, frankly, it's kind of it's a bit of a double standard, If you're going to attack Hillary Clinton, if you're going to attack Kamala Harris, if you're going to attack Julian Castro, if you're going to attack fill in the blank, Kirsten Gillibrand for not doing anything, well, you don't have to attack. It's not an attack to point out, hey, Ocasio-Cortez, where are you on this? So the whole be patient, listen, it's not like this coup in Venezuela, we could wait. This is going to happen. The steps are happening. This is an urgent situation. So I don't really give a damn if she's progressive. And by the way, it's not just her. Elizabeth Warren hasn't said a damn thing about this. As far as I know, Raul Grijalva has not. He's progressive. Bernie Sanders has not come out strongly against this. I mean, am I missing any progressives? I don't believe Jeff Merkley has said anything about this, senator from Oregon. So it's actually good for Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez to be held accountable from her base. Not just her, any progressive. Same thing to Tulsi Gabbard. If Tulsi Gabbard wasn't coming out strong, you'd be hearing this from me. Because it's not just about Venezuela, by the way. It's not just about Venezuela. It's about, if you call yourself a progressive, do you believe the United States has the right to decide for other countries their future and their destiny? I don't think that matches with being a progressive. What I do think, in extreme cases of humanitarian crisis, of genocide, I'm talking like the Holocaust, the United States could have a role. It doesn't mean taking over countries, but it means coming together in a global coalition. So don't confuse what I'm saying. This isn't in particular about her. I believe, and by the way, saying this publicly, you know why a lot of people wouldn't say this publicly? Because they want to interview Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. That's why some channels probably wouldn't criticize her, because they want access to, including independent outlets. But guess what? I don't give a flying fuck about access. That's the little secret in journalism. You don't need access to politicians to grow an audience. You don't need access to politicians to have integrity or grow a business. Would I like an interview with Ocasio-Cortez? Absolutely. Does my life or business depend on it? No. I would like her to tweet out our Flint story, which I've sent to her representative many times, but that has nothing to do with what I'm saying. And by the way, this doesn't just go for Ocasio-Cortez. There's a new progressive Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley from Massachusetts. I could have missed it, but I don't see anything from her on the Venezuela situation. Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib. So, that's it. That's what I have to say. So, before I move on, let's see where we're at. We weren't raising much money, I'm not going to lie, so I hope you guys start to empty the wallets before you watch the Super Bowl or whatever else you're doing. We're at 41,197. My goal for today is 42,000, so we're about $803 away. I don't know if there's one kind humanitarian out there, but hopefully together, you got, how many people are watching right now? got 356 people watching right now, so I would venture to guess if 356 people left $5 a pop. Let's see the math on that. 356 times 5. Wow, that's a hell of a lot more than 800. So we don't even, 356 people at $5 would equal 1780, so 1,780. So that would be delightful, don't get me wrong. But, you know, whoever could contribute to the GoFundMe, you're not doing it for me, you're doing it for status quo, which brings me to Ty and I will be hitting the road, probably this coming weekend. So we were thinking about where we wanted to go, what kind of stuff we wanted to cover, and I am very big, if you remember at the Young Turks, I am very big on going places when the cameras have left. And I am very big on covering stories about the disappearing middle class. Because the reason that these oligarchs, the reason that these capitalists, the reason that these oligarchs and these capitalists continue to get away with economic murder is because the corporate media allows it, because the corporate media don't give a damn about layoffs. The corporate media cares about layoffs when it hits BuzzFeed, when it hits Vice, when it hits the Huffington Post. Oh, they care about the layoffs when it has to do with them. Because, like all other humans, they care about themselves, but not the people in Lordstown, Ohio, not the people in Detroit. So we are going to go to Lordstown, Ohio. We're going to go to Detroit, and we are going to speak with as many laid-off workers from General Motors as we can, because this needs to stop being normalized. General Motors got $11.2 billion from the federal government. It's a billion with a B. And what did they do with it? They're still making money, General Motors, but they laid off 15,000 workers. And I spoke with the United Auto Workers last week. They're sending 7-day notices to workers that they're offering a transfer to. 7-day notices to, hey, if you want to move, let's say you live in Detroit, if you want to move to Texas to work at the General Motors factory down there, if you want to move to Flint, work at the factory there, if you want to move to Indiana, work at the factory there, or a couple other states. Imagine if you live paycheck to paycheck. Imagine if you are given 7 days notice to uproot yourself and your family, or you lose your job. In some cases, to move across the country. Imagine if you've been working this job at General Motors for a year, 5 years, 10 years, 2 decades. This is why you get Donald Trump in office, because Donald Trump was able to con these people. Donald Trump was able to con these people in Wisconsin, in Michigan, in Ohio, in Pennsylvania. He was able to con them into thinking, I'm gonna be the tough guy on these companies offshoring your jobs. I'm gonna reopen these factories. I'm gonna bring your jobs back. Well, I could tell you something. I told you during the campaign it was bullshit, and I hope the people in those states now see it was bullshit. I don't think the Democratic Party is going to bring those jobs back either, because they don't give a damn about those people either. They care when there's an election to win, and then they don't care. So, I believe climate change is a crisis. I believe income inequality is a crisis, and I believe 15,000 people getting laid off because of corporate greed. I don't want to hear their excuses. Well, we had to lay people off because people aren't buying these cars anymore. Then you keep these workers and you build different vehicles that are more in demand. And you keep these workers and you do research and development to see what will work. Or you keep these workers and you build more hybrid cars. You build more electric cars. Or you don't lay these people off just like that, but you give them a very, very lavish severance package. It's for them to have months of health benefits and pay as they try to find new work. You don't give them 7 days if they want to transfer. And by the way, that 15,000 people were worked off. were laid off. I spoke with them last week. United Auto Workers, 600 have been transferred. So it's not like all 15,000 are being transferred. You want to talk about Russia is threatening our democracy? No, 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 no. Unfettered, unending corporate and political greed is what's destroying this country. And by the way, that's how fascists rise. That's how you get a Donald Trump. Somebody with a little bit of charisma, somebody who could somebody who could sell snake oil to a grandma on the curb, somebody who could paper over his non-existent record, flip-flop 24/7. That's how these people get elected. I've already shown you the real reason Donald Trump won those states. It wasn't WikiLeaks. It wasn't Russia. Read the exit polls. It was immigration and it was trade. The strongest responses were about trade in these Midwest states. And the trade is because their jobs have been sold off to the cheapest bidder. Maru, I went and set up a $5 subscription instead of going to the GoFundMe. Hope that works as well. I may change it to 10 later. I highly appreciated your work in Flint and from the 2016 election cycle. Maru, am I pronouncing it right, Maru? Thank you, thank you, thank you. To be honest with you, Maru, I prefer, and we prefer, becoming a member. If you could only do one, we prefer a membership. And I'll tell you why. And I'm going to keep it real, folks. I'm going to keep it real. I'm having conversations. I'm working 7 days a week, all day, okay? And I'm having conversations with individuals and companies to try and get larger funding. I will be transparent with you. I will be transparent with you. They are not special interests. They are not plutocrats. They are not plutocrats who fund the Democratic Party. Yesterday, I had a conversation with somebody who works, he's in the music industry, works in the entertainment industry, knows celebrities, blah, blah, blah. That's kind of the people I'm talking to. People who know progressives, who know progressive celebrities, progressive people to try and get some funding. I am not going to take any funding from the very people that we're reporting against. Not going to do it. Actually, I just had an offer from a radio station in D.C. I'm not going to name the name, but I just had an offer for investment from a radio station in Washington, D.C., but they said they could only invest if we choose a mission. We can't be investigative reporting and progressive opinion. We can't be both. We have to be straight reporters or left-wing advocacy. I kindly told him to go fuck himself. Because I told him, this is 2019, and this is a false choice between you have to be a straight-laced investigative reporter or progressive person. No, progressive opinion. You can't be both. Reporters have opinions. Every reporter has an opinion. Every reporter's opinion affects their work. I'm just honest with you about it. I'm just honest with you. This is my opinion. I'm a progressive. It doesn't affect the facts I report. I will always give you the facts that I have researched and I know. And if those facts aren't good for progressives, then I will be honest. But I said no. So we are looking for larger funding. But do you know what helps try and get larger funding? Larger, if it's an individual or a company. You know what they want to see? Well, how many paid subscribers do you have? They want to see that there's consistent money coming in. So that's why we've been pushing membership so much, because membership is how we grow on a recurring, consistent basis. So I hope you understand I'm not sitting here begging you for dollars, and I don't mind begging the working people of America or internationally for my health. I actually have not been taking money from the first time I took significant money. I took like $1,000 was 2 weeks ago because I'm bleeding through my savings. Other than that, I haven't been taking money. But that's why this is a long-winded way of saying, if you only could do one, GoFundMe or membership, do the membership. You could do it as low as $5 a month. You could do it at $10 a month, $20 a month, or $147 annually, statuscoup.com/join. So we're going to cover the GM layoffs, which I'm trying to get interviews now. Begging is fine. Stealing is not cool. I agree. And by the way, Desi Mergy, I'm glad you brought that up. I'm not going to get into details, but there were things said about me, let's see, a year and a half ago that were simply bullshit. You could read in between the lines of what I'm talking about, but never stolen in my life. I would never steal. I'm actually one cheap motherfucker, and I'm pretty responsible with money. Go ask any of my camera people. Go ask any of my camera people that have been out on the road with me. I am the cheapest motherfucker, and I yell at them when they spend too much. There you go. Patrick, $2 in the super chat. Membership has its privileges. Yeah, I didn't even mention. You get bonus behind the scenes content. We just did a members only call Thursday night. We went for like an hour and a half. It's a video call, so like I'm talking to the members. We do bonus in the field clips, so you get to see us as we're being, casual. You'll laugh, you'll cry, you'll scream. So membership has bonus content too. If you're members, you could go to statuscoup.com. Go every day. We're not uploading every day, but we have several member clips every week. And as we grow, my goal is to hire somebody that could actually create more content for just members. And of course, if you're struggling financially, if you don't know if you're going to be able to afford rent this week, we totally understand. So, we don't want to make anybody's situation worse. No problem if you can't. If you have it in your budget, listen, frankly, there's a lot of outlets out there asking you to subscribe, become a member, and what the fuck are they giving you? 20 segments on Donald Trump a day? More rantings about Russia? Is that really worth your money? I'm asking. I'm not talking about anybody in particular here, but is it really worth it? I mean, we're not telling you what we're going to do. We're showing you what you're going to do. I just booked a flight for Ty. Ty's coming out to New York. We're driving to Detroit. We're driving to Ohio, and we might go to a third place. And we're reporting on things that no one else is. Anthony Reyes, I did not steal anything. I'll leave it at that. That to me was the most, of all the smears that have been out there about me, that was the most laughable to me. So, Michael Cooper, look forward to, you will enjoy that book when I write it. And Colin Tooley, one of our editors, who edits all these great videos with Jill Stein, Rania, and Mike from the Humanist Report that I'm going to play in a little bit. He's been editing that. So, Bob K. I'm not a member because I want anything. I'm in it to see you grow and cover more stories that MSNBC will never cover. Well, thank you, Bob. But I always like to tell the people what you get, too. But yes, it is part of your civic duty to be a member. So we're going to cover the General Motors layoffs. We're also going to go to Cleveland. If you watched my interview with the author of a study, 17% of children in Cleveland have been found to have high lead levels. That's down from 45%. But they still have 17%. 17% of kids in Cleveland have high lead levels. How is this not a national emergency? How is this not leading every news network? You're destroying children's bodies and brains because they're poor and black. So we're going to go to Cleveland and talk to some people about that. Then we're going to go to Detroit. Going to interview some folks that got laid off there from General Motors. There's also a water crisis in Detroit. They shut off all the water fountains in Detroit public schools last year because of high lead levels. You see that on CNN? You see Rachel Maddow warning that the Russians might try to, contaminate the water in Detroit? No, she doesn't need to because it's the American government contaminating the water in Detroit and Flint. So we're going to cover all these things. Might not go viral. It's not the sexiest topics, but this is why Status Quo exists. We're going to do things the right way, even if it takes a while to grow. Propaganda. Even if I think AOC is a joke, we at least agree that Jordan is cool. I don't think she's a joke. Don't put those words in my mouth. Matt, what do you think about Tulsi's speech, Jordan? I didn't watch the whole thing, but the parts I watched, I really liked. And I think they're going to make her out to be a crazy person and a communist because she talks about peace around the world instead of us invading every other country known to man. I thought it was a good speech. And you could tell that they're going to try and blacklist her because did you see it on CNN? Did you see it on MSNBC? Did you see it anywhere? Nope. You did not. So, before I get to my next topic, whoa. Now they're bringing the big guns. Sandeepan, $200 in the GoFundMe. Theo, $25 in the GoFundMe. $100 in the GoFundMe from Angel. $5 from Jonathan Durham. Now we're at $41,522. Sandeepan, thank you because you've done so many contributions. And by the way, I got the hats and the shirts now, so I'm going to start mailing out more of those packages to you fine folks. If you haven't heard me say this 25 times, $100 gets you a hat or a shirt. $127 gets you a hat and a shirt. $200 gets you that white swag bag. $250 gets you that backpack. And we've been tardy on sending out packages. I sent out 4 this week, but this week I'm probably going to send out about 10 to 15 because we were waiting for. It's annoying. The shirts got mailed to me and the hats got mailed to Jen, so we had to get them together. So, keep the GoFundMe coming. Keep the membership coming. I want to talk about a little thing. called Medicare for All. You with me? So I'm going to play a clip. Do you know these people from Pod Save America? And yes, hit the like button if you haven't. Do you know these people from Pod Save America? You know, they're former Obama speechwriters and former Obama workers. And they're like they've been viewed as like so super cool. Pod Save America, they're super cool. And they're super with it. Really, they're just neoliberals that have a podcast, white privileged dudes who don't really talk to the rest of America and really have no idea what's going on. Hold on. So here's a clip from Pod Save America, their thoughts on Medicare for All.
Legitimate policy arguments in favor of a Medicare access approach as opposed to a Medicare for all approach that is not ideological in the sense that it doesn't make you less liberal and it doesn't make you less progressive to view it as a positive outcome, because again, we are all going to end up paying for healthcare. The ultimate goal here is not a process one. It is not, a private healthcare plan versus a Medicare plan. If you have good insurance that you can afford, that protects you when you need it most, that gives you the option to get the preventative care that you need without bankrupt you and your family, that makes you feel safe and protected, that is the goal. As a country, our goal is to pay for everyone's health care in a way that doesn't eat up a greater and greater share of our gross domestic product. That is the ultimate goal. The debate about policy, the debate about process is a really, really important one, but it should not be always reduced to this ideological question as to whether or not you're going along with Bernie or if you're part of the neoliberals. It is more complicated and a more nuanced than that.
I'm going to play that again. Just give me a minute. You got the sirens going in New York City. Okay, so this is John Favreau. He used to be Obama's speechwriter. Let him be an apologist for those offering incrementalism on Medicare for All. Here we go.
There are legitimate policy arguments in favor of a Medicare access approach as opposed to a Medicare for all approach that is not ideological in the sense that it doesn't make you less liberal and it doesn't make you less progressive to view it as a positive outcome, because again, we are all going to end up paying for healthcare. The ultimate goal here is not a process one. It is not, a private healthcare plan versus a Medicare plan. If you have good insurance that you can afford, that protects you when you need it most, that gives you the option to get the preventative care that you need without bankrupt you and your family, that makes you feel safe and protected. That is the goal. As a country, our goal is to pay for everyone's health care in a way that doesn't eat up a greater and greater share of our gross domestic product. That is the ultimate goal. The debate about policy, the debate about process is a really, really important one, but it should not be always reduced to this ideological question as to whether or not you're going along with Bernie or if you're part of the neoliberals. It just is, it is more complicated and a more nuanced than that.
So that was a pretty an attempt at being eloquent, but really what he was saying there was, unity. Let's not go after each other because, there's really no big difference between Medicare access and Medicare for all. And you know what I thought? And I tweeted this out, I think yesterday. You know what I thought when I heard this? This sounds like an individual with fantastic health care. This sounds like an individual with great health care, low copays, low deductibles, no hidden, no surprise costs, low copays. The doctors that take his plans are very good, and it seems like a guy with pretty good health care. How do I know? Because he works for a company that's doing really well. And a lot of companies that are doing very well have decent health care. So I thought, if that guy, he was Obama's speechwriter, I believe. If that guy spent some time in like Detroit, in the hood, because I've been there, and I don't call it the hood in a derogatory way, they told me to call it the hood. I didn't call it the hood when I was there. They told me to call it the hood. Or, spend some time in Flint, spend some time in, name your place. It really doesn't matter, because now middle-class towns, you have access to health care. Yeah, I have access to go have some, $100 creme brulee right now. It doesn't mean I can afford to do it. But this is the toxic mentality. I don't, this is also, it's very much like these Vox. Vox, it's a website. And they give explainers, and all their stories are like, Medicare for all explained, because they live in academia, and they live in a world of academia and numbers, and they've never talked to a struggling person in their life. This is the problem with corporate media, because it's not media, it's not journalism, it's propaganda. They don't actually go out to talk to anyone. Do you know why I go out and cover the stories in the field that I do? It's not just because I care about the people. It's not just because I want to get critical issues and actually put a face to the struggle. It's because this is how I get informed. You can't get informed reading articles on websites. It could help you know what's going on, but there's bias in all of that. The only way to get truly informed is to go out and find out things for yourself. To go out and talk to people that live in other places or go through other things. Not everyone could do that. So sometimes it starts just where you live. Go to city council. Go to different places. Go beyond what you're being told or fed by local media. But I go out because you lose connection to what's actually really going on out there if you don't go. So this guy's saying that. Of course there's a major difference between Medicare access and Medicare for all. One keeps the power in the private insurance industry. One keeps the power in the private insurance industry. And one keeps the power in the people's hands. Medicare access is Medicare access is like a little, it's a hedge. It's a way of saying, oh, we're helping the worker bees, but we're still placating the private insurance industry so we don't lose that money. The private insurance industry its goal is not to help people get health care. Its goal is not to get people. Its goal is not to make sure you can prevent cancer or get treatment for cancer. Its goal is not to make sure you can prevent yourself from getting cancer or other illnesses. Its goal is to make sure they pay as little as humanly possible so that they can make profits. And at its base level, that is immoral. Health insurance should not be a profit-seeking business. It should be a safety net for a civilized country's citizens, because those citizens pay taxes for their government to give them services. It's as simple as that. It should have never been a big industry. That doesn't mean there can't be private doctors. Maybe there's a doctor who's the only doctor in America that could do a certain type of surgery. Or maybe there's a doctor that's the only person who could do XYZ, whatever. And for certain families who could afford it, you go to that doctor. You know, it's like free public college doesn't mean there's not going to be Yale. You could still send your kid to Yale, but that's the very meaning of access. You have access to Yale, but for the majority of people who can't afford to send their kids to Yale, minus them not getting in, you have free public college, so you could at least be on an equal playing field with everybody else that can afford public college. Thank you, Kilo. Should be a life-saving business. Yes. And it's so interesting. I mean, I was in Germany in 2017. And when I talked to, I actually went out to dinner with two, at the time I was at the Young Turks, so two viewers that were fans then. When I brought this up, it was just like foreign to them. They didn't understand it. Like, yeah, I don't get it. It's just like, you're covered here. It's part of being a citizen. That's how it is in most civilized countries, but we're no longer a civilized country. We are an oligarchy. This is the United Corporations of America. So what is he talking about? Well, you know, there's a policy argument between Medicare for all and Medicare access. No, there's not. Here it is, okay? Private insurance industry? Sorry. I know you're going to lose jobs. Sorry. I'm not belittling losing jobs, but losing jobs in the private healthcare industry versus tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people of continuing to be sick and die? Which one's more of a problem? And by the way, Medicare for all would be cheaper for the United States of America long term. So this isn't an issue of what's more fiscally responsible, what's a better plan. This is an issue with neoliberals like that guy don't want to take out the private insurance industry because the private insurance industry has been good to the Democratic Party and is good to the Republican Party. That's it. And you could have Medicare for all and still have private doctors. You could have both. But those private doctors, you're not going to be able to price gouge because you're going to have competition. So, honestly, you shouldn't have got into medicine in the first place if your goal was to become a multimillionaire. And I understand they go to school for many, many years, more years than most other professions. I understand that. But you know what? I've had these conversations with other people too. Doctors in Germany, in Paris, in the UK, in other single-payer countries, they make good money. They make good money. You could be a doctor, you could be a healthcare professional and make good money in a government system. Which is why I was very disappointed, on top of that stooge, to hear Sherrod Brown, the Ohio senator who's thinking about running for president, say it's Medicare for all is just not practical. Not practical. This is from Common Dreams. While not a 2020 presidential candidate yet, Senator Sherrod Brown broke from the pack of announced and expected Democrats on Friday by coming out against Medicare for all, characterizing a system that would cover everybody and leave nobody as not practical, and was greeted by a widespread reaction of thank you, next, and adios from progressives no longer willing to entertain half measures when it comes to solving the nation's healthcare crisis or bolstering the private insurance industry. Quote, I know most of the Democratic primary candidates are talking about Medicare for all. I think instead we should do Medicare at 55, Brown said during a question and answer session at the Chamber of Commerce in Clear Lake, Iowa. Brown said that reducing the age or letting people over 55 buy into the existing Medicare system early would have a better chance of getting through Congress. Quote, I'm not going to come and make a lot of promises like President Trump did. I'm not going to talk about what's practical and what we can, I'm going to talk about what's practical and we can make happen. And if that makes me different from the other candidates, so be it. Progressive critics like Splinter's Libby Watson, however, took issue. Thank you, next. Quote, you know what isn't practical, she added? Spending twice as much as other rich nations for worse outcomes. Quote, it's always practical to leave people behind and maintain corporate power, tweeted Michael Lightley, a healthcare policy expert and founding fellow at the left-leaning Sanders Institute. But it is the right kind of leadership, he noted. We can make the necessary possible. Ahead of Brown's comments, Watson on Friday wrote a long and detailed column explaining why the kind of Medicare at 55 or Medicare buy-in plan the senator is proposing, basically a public option but available only to certain segments of the population, is not just bad policy, but bad politics. It's not necessarily that what Brown is calling for would make things worse, she argued. It's that things are already catastrophically bad, and anything that just tinkers around the edges just keeps us in dire straits. So, I mean, I don't really care about Sherrod Brown. I mean, I wasn't that interested in Sherrod Brown anyway. I mean, is he more progressive than Kamala Harris? Yes, but this is very much like Hillary Clinton. I'm not going to suggest things that aren't practical and can't get through Congress. I'm not going to suggest things that aren't practical that will never happen. I'm just not going to do it. Well, you know what for a long time was said isn't practical and was never going to get through in Congress or even the Supreme Court? Gay marriage. 5 years before gay marriage passed in the Supreme Court. These were the same talking points. Gay marriage can never happen. Same thing goes with civil rights. That's not practical. Black people voting. That's not practical. So all of these people, like Sherrod Brown, who thinks he's a progressive, and he votes the right way on a lot of things, he put forth a bill to break up the big banks in 2010. So he's done good stuff. No doubt about it. But this notion that, leadership is basically about proposing whatever you think you could actually get through. No, leadership is about galvanizing the troops, galvanizing the masses, galvanizing the people, galvanizing grassroots organizers, galvanizing progressive interest groups, voter education, barnstorming the country, and shaming the opposition, both Republican and Democrat, to force real change to go through. And it doesn't happen overnight, but you don't get it done if you quit right out of the gate. Yes, Medicare at 65 happened. And at the time, you had people like Ronald Reagan saying, this is the end of civilization as we know it. Thank you, Golden Silence. Women's rights. So this is honestly conservative talking points. What's practical? Well, you know what? Sherrod Brown, what do I say to you? 70% of Americans want Medicare for all, right? So 52% of Republicans want Medicare for all. So it's very practical because we supposedly live in a republic and a democracy. So republics and democracies are supposed to serve decide on public policy based on the will of the people. Of course, that's not how it actually works in this country. It's the will of the donors. But it's very practical because you have the people behind you. So what you're saying is we can't win. We can't fight donors. We can't fight corrupt politicians. And to that, I do say, next. If you want to be one of these, centrist, we could only do certain things and it'll never get through the Senate, it will never get through Congress. Maybe your thing should be, no, You're never going to get reelected if you vote against the will of the people. You're never going to get reelected if you vote against many, many, many economists who say this will save the country money. Because people can't wait till it is practical. America's life expectancy is going down. You don't see that much in the media, but America's average life expectancy is going down. So I was very disappointed to see that from Sherrod Brown. Frankly, as kindly as I could say it, like, where's your balls? Because that's not a message that's going to win. And by the way, it's not actually being practical. It's not actually being practical. It's not. Practical is reading a poll and then galvanizing support behind that. You know, maybe if you became president fighting for this, and then it was very difficult and they were obstructing, then you know what you do? You point out the obstruction. You point out the obstruction. You point out. You go around the country. Obama, after Newtown, did a little speech, cried. I think it was genuine. He was definitely affected. And then he said, well, the Republicans control Congress, so I can't do anything. This was a man with some of the most gifted oratory skills we've ever seen in office. He could have barnstormed the country. He could have went to Mitch McConnell's Kentucky. Could have went to Paul Ryan's Wisconsin. Could have went all over this country to shame these people taking money from the NRA, including Florida, where Marco Rubio is, including Texas, where Ted Cruz is. Did nothing. You want to know why? Because he has a bunch of neoliberals in his head saying, don't waste the political energy. Let's focus here. As people continue getting massacred, school after school, concert after concert. Don't waste the energy, they say. So, you know what? Whether it's Pod Save America saying, well, you know, there is an argument to be made for Medicare access. No, there is no argument to be made. We need universal health care, not access, as a right. Economists that are not bought off have pointed out that this will save the United States a lot of money. You will also have health problems decrease. And when health problems decrease, your health outcomes and your health costs, your healthcare costs will go down as more and more people get preventive care. So it's a great system. Your life expectancy will go up. Children will have more services. It's not complicated. But we can't do it with a private insurance industry in the driver's seat. Period. End of discussion. So, with that said, we are now on hour 4 of our live stream. To keep it real, folks, haven't raised that much money today. Just keeping it real. So I'm about to air my interview with Mike from the Humanist Report. We spoke for a while. I hope if you liked the interview, you could drop a couple bucks, $5, $10, whatever you could leave. As a reminder, $100 get you a Status Quo hat and shirt. $100 get you a Status Quo hat or shirt. $127 gets you both. And I'm mailing out more hats and shirts this week. So keep it coming if you can. I understand if you can't. But Ty and I are hitting the road as soon as this weekend. So we definitely appreciate your support in GoFundMe. And remember, long-term, how we grow is statusquo.com/join. Become a member. Support the media revolution. $5 a month, $10 a month, $20 a month, or $147 a year. We really appreciate it. It's like Christmas every morning when I look at our subscriber numbers and see a few more people signing up. So really consider it. You get great bonus content, behind-the-scenes footage you don't get on YouTube, my diaries. You're going to get bonus clips when we're in the field, all that good stuff. We just had a call for members, a video call we did the other night. So we appreciate it. Keep it coming, statusquo.com/join, and the GoFundMe. I'll put the links in right here. I would love to get to 42,000, so we're a little under $500 will get us to 42,000. Statusquo.com/join, GoFundMe. Do we have some great humanitarians out there? I think so. So, here is my interview with Mike from the Humanist Report. Hey, it's Jordan. Joining me now is the humanist himself, Mike Figueredo from Humanist Report on YouTube. And you were nice enough last year to have me on to talk about Flint and some other things. So glad to have you on. I kind of want to start. There's so much to talk about, but is it just me, or is the media like unofficially working as public relations for Kamala Harris?
It kind of seems to be that way, just a little bit, when you factor into consideration that they're doing, CNN specifically is doing a town hall just for her in Iowa, kind of an important state. It's the first primary state. That's big. And also when you consider the fact that MSNBC actually hired Kamala Harris's sister, there's some cause for concern. She's definitely the media's darling right now. And I can see why that's the case because, one, I mean, she's charismatic. I don't think anybody would deny that. So, I mean, you kind of are drawn to these people just instinctively. But also she's kind of the establishment's darling. She has been the person who it seems as if they've anointed up till this point. I mean, at first we thought maybe that was Beto O'Rourke. And they've kind of shifted back and forth between who it seems like they're going to go with. But, I mean, Kamala Harris does seem to be the one. So, yeah, I do think it's safe to say that she is the media's darling. And when Bernie Sanders announces inevitably, compare the coverage that he gets to hers, and it's not even going to be close.
Well, as a viewer, not that I doubt you're watching CNN much, but as a viewer, don't you think, it would be important for you to know when they're covering Kamala Harris that Time Warner, who as of last year was CNN's parent company, is Kamala Harris's largest contributor? To be clear, for the people who are going to come after me, individuals from Time Warner. So in 2016, when she ran for California Senate, individuals working for Time Warner donated $127,000 to her Senate campaign. Not a small chunk of change. So when you look at her donor sheet, that's number one. And, I did the math. I highly doubt 639 Time Warner employees each donated $200. I'm pretty sure it was heavy-hitting executives, senior leadership, because $127,000, that's a lot. You don't think that's kind of odd that that's her top donor, that company, meaning the individuals who work for it, she gets a town hall the day after she announces, I'm still waiting for a town hall for Elizabeth Warren, Tulsi Gabbard, even Kirsten Gillibrand, Julian Castro.
Yeah. I mean, it's just a matter of, is this something that they should disclose? Absolutely. And to your point about it being individual donors, I think that David Dole of the Rational National made a phenomenal point about this, that just because they're not taking corporate PAC money doesn't necessarily mean that there aren't still going to be issues there, because you're going to attend these cocktail parties with people and do these fundraisers where they're all going to donate, a relatively small amount, $200. That's a lot of money to you and I, but to these millionaires, that's not that much money. In fact, it's nothing to them. But I mean, you're still in their circles, you're still talking with them, and there's still that conflict of interest, that cultivation of bias, if you're in these limousine liberal circles. So it's still an issue. And yeah, I mean, like you said, even with Kirsten Gillibrand, not a fan of her. I know you're not a fan of her, but at the same time, you think that if they want to appear neutral, right? I mean, objectivity is the real goal, but if you want to at least appear neutral, then you should try to give equal time to the serious candidates. And love her or hate her, Kirsten Gillibrand is a serious candidate. I do think that Julian Castro is a fairly serious candidate. Tulsi Gabbard is definitely a serious candidate. Elizabeth Warren is, I think, probably the most serious candidate who's announced. So it's odd that they haven't done this town hall for her. And look, maybe they will, but I mean, to just out of the gate say, oh, she announced, here's a town hall, I think that just speaks to, the corporate media's bias. And it shows you, if you're a candidate that can get that reaction from corporate media, then that says something about you. It says that you're probably not looking out for the people.
And I'd love to know what you think. I hate to even have to put this as a disclaimer, but these days you have to. Obviously, I don't care that she's black. I don't care that she's a woman. I don't care really
I just care that she's running for president. But when I heard her speech in Oakland, which I thought was a really good speech, to tell you the truth,
Yeah.
it did remind me a little bit of Barack Obama circa 2007. And I'll tell you why. She was talking in very grandiose terms about, common ground. We're already standing on common ground. And it had these very similar tones to Obama. There's no red America, there's no blue America, and there's just the United States. And there wasn't a lot of actual policy or substance. It was more just inspired, grandiose talk about bringing everybody together and our values. And it reminded me a lot of Barack Obama because, frankly, it's not like Hillary Clinton was talking this way. When you heard her speak, we'll get into the policy, but do you see similarities, with basically that kind of, makes it look like it's very progressive, but in practice, maybe not so?
Yeah, I saw similarities not only to Obama, but Bill Clinton, because Bill Clinton, if you watch his speeches, he was also very charismatic. He was a speaker, and even though he was a complete bullshitter, he did come off as someone who just seemed like an average person, So, yeah, and I won't say that I don't care that she's a black woman. I do think that that's awesome. I love that we're at a time now to where we can have such a diverse field. People who are gay running for president. I think that's great. But the point is that the policies are always going to be more important, because I wouldn't vote for someone who's a woman of color who's Republican because the policies are abhorrent, right? So, I mean, I could put those two things aside. I think we have to disaggregate, the identity, because sure, that matters.
I mean, I meant I don't care as far as I'm not making a comparison to Obama based on race. Because if you say anything about Kamala Harris, you're racist, you're sexist. And if I say that she reminds me of Obama, I mean, they're going to, dub me as that. So that's what I meant. But continue.
Right. No, that makes sense. No, and Obama was the last president, and he was incredibly charismatic, So I'm not even worried about, because there's so many bad faith liberal actors that we saw back in 2016 that we already know what they're going to do. They're going to try to weaponize someone's identity to make sure that your criticism seems as if it's more nefarious than it is in actuality. But I think that progressives have gotten a lot more savvy over the last couple of years, knowing about, these establishment hacks and what they intend to do. But yeah, I agree with you for the most part. I do see Obama. I see Clinton when I look at Kamala Harris, because she's charismatic. If you can speak in a way that sounds really nice when you're not saying anything too substantive, that is a quality of previous presidents, especially charismatic ones like Bill Clinton and Obama. So yeah, I do see what you see there.
And I'd like to ask you, because it's really interesting to me, when it was Bernie Sanders proposing Medicare for all, free public college, these kinds of things, totally non-starter, it's radical, these things will never happen. But I don't hear that talk about Kamala Harris from the same Democrats who said that about Bernie Sanders. They say, she's taking the pulse of America and she's so great. I mean, literally, people that were saying Bernie Sanders is just not pragmatic, not practical, are cheering on Kamala Harris. So I'm thinking it's one of two things. Number one, they know she's not actually going to do that, and it's just all kind of window dressing. Or number two, it's really not so much about the policy as it is they are deathly, not about the person. They're deathly afraid of Bernie Sanders because they know, the consultant fees might go down, tighter regulation. What are your thoughts on, it seems a lot of people like Kamala when they didn't like the same things coming from Bernie.
Yeah, and the same is true for AOC. A lot of people who hate Bernie love AOC when they're talking about the same things. I put out a tweet recently about how all of these people who are standing for Kamala Harris or any of the establishment wing, Julian Castro, Kirsten Gillibrand, they have to come to grips with the fact that their favorite candidate copied Bernie Sanders. He completely set the stage for the 2020 Democratic Party primary. Love him or hate him, that's an objective fact that they have to come to grips with. So he popularized these policies, and now there's this idea that, you got what you want, Bernie. You have everyone talking about these issues, so why don't you just drop out and let them run? Nobody's explicitly said this, right? But this is the overall implication. It's kind of what is, I don't know, maybe I'm a little bit too cynical, but that's what I feel as if they're kind of alluding to and what they hope. But in reality, these candidates who are talking about Medicare for all, they only recently came around to it. I think it's more just smarter for us, quite frankly, to go with the person who's been fighting for these things for years. But to kind of get to your question about, this double standard to where, all of a sudden Medicare for all isn't a crazy idea. It just really speaks to them paying deference to anyone from the establishment. Because if you're from the establishment, you're just automatically assumed to be more reasonable, more practical, more pragmatic in the actual policymaking approach. So if she says Medicare for all, maybe, they're applying their own definition of what that means. Oh, maybe it just means expanding access. Maybe she doesn't mean free at the point of service. I don't know what's in their minds, but it's absolutely weird. And I think it just speaks to kind of this visceral bias that people in the mainstream media has. And I also think that it illustrates this civil war that's been going on within the Democratic Party, where you have people on our side who are on the progressive left. We're fighting for people like Bernie Sanders and AOC, not because we love them and there's this cult of personality, but because of their policies. I couldn't care less about the person. You can put a stuffed animal in Bernie's position with, a sign that says all the policies. I vote for that stuffed animal. I don't give a shit. It's about the policies. But for them, on the establishment side, it's not really about the policies. It's simply about maintaining the status quo. And if they can get one of their team members in, then that's all that they really care about. So I think that that's what it's about. They don't want the progressive left to get a win. And it's obvious. It's because, Bernie Sanders threatens the donor class. Kamala Harris may be talking about Medicare for all, but we all know that she doesn't pose a real threat to the donor class. I mean, Obama was talking about a public option, So it's just, I think that they just kind of give this, they pay deference and fealty to these candidates who are saying things that sound progressive because they know that they're bullshitting.
And last question on Kamala, You said the word cynical, and I think, honestly, the problem is we haven't been cynical enough. I mean, I, like many people, got hoodwinked by Barack Obama, who promised to heal the world and all that. And maybe he meant it, and then just came in office, and it didn't happen. But I don't think it's radical to ask if she's always been for Medicare for all. If, she said, I feel strongly about this, she said during the debate. Well, I've spoken with people in California politics. She said nothing when the bill was going through California for single
That's such a great point.
For single payer in California, and she was running for Senate. So it seems to me, yes, you're not running for California Senate, you're running for federal, but you would be leading and urging that. I mean, nobody believes that if Nancy Pelosi, the most powerful politician from California, wants Medicare for all, it wouldn't go through in California. There's a lot of behind-the-scenes puppet mastery that goes on. So I say, all right, you signed on when Bernie moved the needle, but you said nothing during the California primary. And it goes to the broader issue. Kirsten Gillibrand is now a Johnny-come-lately progressive. Cory Booker, all of a sudden, no corporate PAC money. Is it the establishment says, well, people could evolve. What are your thoughts on evolution versus political calculation?
Well, I think that we have to be savvy enough to realize what policies are politically expedient. Medicare for all is a politically expedient position right now. You're not going to make it through a Democratic Party primary if you don't back Medicare for all. That's just a fact now. Because Bernie Sanders and progressives like AOC, they've moved the needle and really shifted the Overton window, at least in the left sphere, the center left to the left sphere, to where if you don't back it, you're not viable. So they know this. They know that there are a certain number of things that they've got to tell us in order to be at least minimally viable. Joe Biden, he's not saying it. I think he's going to faceplant pretty quickly. But, I suck at predictions, so I shouldn't say that and give him a boost inadvertently. But, yeah, I think that evolution in and of itself is really important, right? We should always applaud people when they evolve because we all evolve. Like, I'm constantly evolving, we're all constantly evolving. Nobody is the static being to where we choose these policy ideas, then we stick with it forever. We're always changing with new information. But there's a difference between evolving and there's a difference between being a leader and having the foresight to be on the right side of history from the beginning. So, for example, Bernie Sanders, he was talking about Medicare for all before you and I were born. So, I'm glad, I welcome the evolution of Kirsten Gillibrand, Kamala Harris. If they want to get on board and fight for Medicare for all, they're great allies in the Senate if they truly would fight for it. But in terms of you evolving last year and now willing to lead on that issue, I just don't buy it, and nobody should buy it. And getting back to the subject of cynicism, we're cynical because, like, for millennials, Obama was my very first vote. I believed in him, and I was betrayed, you know? So our very first exposure to politics was betrayal, you know? And maybe that's controversial to say, but I was utterly disappointed in Obama, and I still voted for him twice because I convinced myself that, well, you know, Mitt Romney's terrible, and Obama, I just know that he will bring about change if he doesn't have to fight for re-election. No, he moved to the right in his second term, you know? So we just have to be realistic about the situation. Welcome aboard. I'm glad you're supporting Medicare for all, but you're not ready to lead on this. And Kamala Harris demonstrated that when she flipped less than 24 hours after unequivocally endorsing Medicare for all. So it's just, you know, you can't lead. Simple as that.
And I also think, I mean, at the end of the day, it's not about, it is about, okay, you're evolving, Cory Booker, Kirsten Gillibrand, but do I really have faith you're not going to evolve once more when you become president? And the donors come calling and this and that. That's how you get people like Barack Obama who, you know, public option, moved to a Republican healthcare plan hatched out of the Heritage Foundation. So that's the problem. You don't have a track record of consistency where you fought for this when it wasn't politically advantageous, when it was politically courageous. So I want to get to Bernie for a second because he hasn't announced yet. I think, as far as I know, part of that reason is because they're still trying to get the campaign infrastructure set up. For a long time, I think he wanted Jeff Weaver to be the manager, and when he finally relented on that, you know, you have to put things together with a new campaign manager. Saying, with that said, not because I'm a Bernie bro, but looking at political strategy, I think there's two arguments you can make at Trump. One, he's the Antichrist and he's un-American, and one is he's a fraud. I think Hillary Clinton tried to make the Antichrist, he's un-American, which he is. I mean, he's definitely doing things that has never been done and are Islamophobic, anti-gay, racist, misogynist, the whole nine. But to actually sway people in Wisconsin, Ohio, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, and I would say Indiana and Iowa and those places, I think you need a candidate that's going to point out, hey, look at all these closed down factories. What happened with that? And to me, Bernie is the only one who could credibly do that because Bernie has the pulse, has always had the pulse of those bread table issues. He's going to show those Rust Belt voters, hey, you know, you got a con man who hoodwinked you. What are your thoughts? Because to me, that's the main argument to win back those states.
Yeah. You know, I think that I've learned something in 2016 that's never underestimate your opponent. So Bernie Sanders, you know, looking at this, I think that if anyone's going to beat Trump, it's going to be Bernie Sanders. I think he just has the best shot because he has a message that, one, is anti-establishment, which we're still in this anti-establishment era in American politics, so where the status quo hasn't worked, so people want something different. But at the same time, I've been very cautious about this because Donald Trump, I mean, Democrats really, to the extent to which they fucked up in 2016 can never be, you know, overstated. Donald Trump as a candidate back then was easier to beat than he will be now. And I say that not knowing what the Mueller investigation will conclude. I say that not knowing if he'll even fucking be in office in 2020, right? But the way that people think is they're always, the rational, self-interested voter is always going to go with what they know rather than what they don't know, right? So they don't like Trump, but they already know what to expect from Donald Trump versus someone else. So Bernie Sanders is the person who I think would be the best bet to go against him because they know that even if Donald Trump may have these mean tweets and whatnot, if they go with someone like Kamala Harris, they don't really know what to expect. They can expect more status quo, and at least Donald Trump isn't the status quo, right? So either way, it's going to be difficult. We have to fight really hard, but if you're just going out of electability, all the polls show Bernie Sanders, well, at least in 2016, we don't necessarily know yet, although recent polls do indicate that he still would, you know, defeat Trump. But Bernie Sanders is the best bet. And if you put up someone like Joe Biden, I just don't think that he's going to excite anyone. I don't think that that will be enough to overcome widespread political apathy. Like, you need a political revolution. You need a Reagan-esque revolution, but on the left, where we just kind of change the dynamic. And Bernie's the only one who I feel is capable of doing that. And we're not going to get this opportunity again for a long time. You know, I don't know when we're going to have another Bernie come along. We have Bernies, you know, in Congress, but are they going to want to run? You know, we have this unique opportunity to where we have to do it. We have to go with Bernie right now, because if we actually do want to defeat Trump, then the only thing that actually defeats the rise of a right-wing fascist is a left-wing populist. We're seeing this everywhere, right? I mean, look at Brazil. Bolsonaro won, but we all know that had Lula not been imprisoned, he would have defeated Bolsonaro, you know? So it's like the antidote is clear, and this is around the world. It's you need a left-wing populist, because these right-wing demagogues, they rise up due to widespread political apathy and desperation. And the only thing that can stop that is a Bernie. Now, with that being said, again, Bernie is different, right? And he's not different in the sense that we don't know who he is and that he's not the most popular politician in the country. I'm saying he'd be different for voters because we know what to expect with Trump, whereas we don't know what to expect with Bernie. Whereas in 2016, if it was Bernie versus Trump, well, either way, we're getting someone who we don't expect. So it's going to be difficult either way. But if you want to roll the dice with a corporate Democrat, I just think that's really risky. It's really risky. And with the Supreme Court possibly going like a really strong majority, 6-3, like we can't risk it. Like we have to nominate someone like Bernie who has the best chance to beat Trump. So I just feel like, you know, I read this article from Amber Frost of Chapo Trap House that resonated with me. She said, it's Bernie, bitch. He's the only game in town. So just realize that this is the moment that we have that we're going to look back on and wish we took action and we're on the right side of history here.
Mm-hmm. I want to ask you, this is airing Sunday, so by that time, as we speak, Tulsi Gabbard is doing her formal kickoff in Hawaii, I believe Saturday. So obviously, there's been a political story that things were kind of a mess in her campaign. I read it. I think 75% of it might be bullshit, but whatever.
I think so too.
Her campaign, I mean, a lot of grassroots campaign are chaotic in the beginning, so I don't really put a lot of stock in that. What I do put stock in is she, if Bernie runs, I think she's a strong addition to the field. She definitely has some things to answer for, which I know you've talked about with your audience. But I'd like to know what you think overall, in addition to the things she needs to answer for, what Bernie brought to the table domestically. So there would be no Medicare for all polling at 70% without Bernie Sanders' campaign. That's just a fact. I think Tulsi Gabbard can bring that in terms of the regime change argument, our endless military-industrial complex. I think a lot of people agree with her, but they don't see a lot of talk about that in the news. What do you think she could bring to the table, and your other thoughts as far as, you know, she does have some answering to do. I'll be clear, like, obviously, I feel differently. I'm not gay, but I thought her video was heartfelt, it seemed. But I'd like to know what your thoughts are and overall what she could bring to the table on a debate stage.
Yeah, I think that she would really set the bar in terms of anti-regime change rhetoric. Now, with that being said, I don't know all of her foreign policy, right? Like, I want to hear more about drones. I want to hear about Israel-Palestine. I want to hear about certain things. But we all know that Bernie Sanders, there's much to be desired when it comes to foreign policy for himself when it comes to Israel-Palestine, even though he's kind of moved further. So I think that Tulsi Gabbard...
And sorry to interrupt you, but keeping it real, I think Bernie's answer on the Venezuela attempted coup wasn't so strong either. So
right. Tulsi's was better. So yeah, I think that for someone to be very vehemently anti-imperialist, regardless of what, you know, is in her past record and whatnot, just to have that on the debate stage, I think that will be really valuable. And one thing that I want to emphasize, because we've both kind of talked about our criticisms of Tulsi Gabbard, it's not like we are criticizing her for nefarious reasons. We've criticized Bernie Sanders as well. The reason why I criticize Tulsi is because I want her to be a stronger candidate and address these criticisms, because in the event we allow these things to go, you know, sweep it under the rug, then it could manifest itself in a really more dangerous way, like in the general election. And it's about building them up, not breaking them down, because either one, Tulsi or Bernie and Elizabeth Warren, they all could be the other's VP. So it's about building these candidates up and improving them, you know? But yeah, I think that Tulsi Gabbard, if she picks like this pet issue of, you know, anti-imperialism, I think that would be really refreshing to hear on a debate stage, because for the most part, we've seen a really strong shift to the right when it comes to the Democratic Party. And I don't know what, the establishment candidates, the Kirstens, the Kamalas, the Corys, I don't know what they're going to say about this. So if we can have someone who's kind of setting the bar pretty high in terms of just strongly, at least in rhetoric, being anti-imperialist, I think that could be incredibly valuable. So yeah, I think she's a great candidate. Am I worried that, progressives will split the vote? A little bit. I want us to have a plurality, so I want to consolidate votes. But with that being said, I'm not undemocratic, and I'm not going to be like those neoliberals who are like, fall in line behind Hillary, but with Bernie. I think that if you want to run and you're not a billionaire, then run, But I think that Tulsi, she does have a lot to offer in terms of anti-imperialism, and she's a vet, so she actually does have that street cred that all the other candidates don't have because she's seen war firsthand. And I think that could resonate with people.
And I also think, it's kind of possible she could attract some of the Ron Paul wing of the libertarian base. They probably don't agree with her and the Bernie wing on all the domestic issues, but Tulsi Gabbard talks a lot like Ron Paul, only less of a crankhead and grumpy. As far as regime change and the never-ending wars. So I think she can pick up some of those votes. I want to ask you about Trump because, I kind of cover the Russia stuff from the point of view of everybody's lost their damn mind. I think I've always said I'm for the investigation. Let's see what it brings. I said even when I was at the Young Turks, I could place my life on the fact that he'll find some form of money laundering. That's...
Oh, yeah.
That's a given. But I never thought there was any concrete evidence that... Because when I was on the campaign trail, the actual original charge of all this, Russiagate, was that Trump campaign worked with the Russian government to get those emails. To get them and then give them to WikiLeaks. So I'm seeing Rachel Maddow now literally doing segments saying the polar vortex, the Russians might use the polar vortex to shut down our electricity and kill people. It's honestly, she's making Glenn Beck back in the day. She's looking crazier than Glenn Beck with the red phone. Do you think people are, kind of primed for a letdown when this investigation comes out? I know you don't like predictions, but I think if Mueller had something really, really damaging, it would have been his responsibility to release it by now.
Yeah. Look, I've said from the beginning, and I haven't really changed, that I am more than willing to accept the evidence. If he comes forward with treason charges, then I'll be like, okay, well, let's see the evidence. But in terms of what I expect, pretty much what I probably could have suspected before the investigation began. Like with other countries, Donald Trump probably has some corrupt business dealings in Russia. In fact, I'd say he certainly has some corrupt business dealings in Russia. I know that they were looking into creating a Trump Tower in Moscow, and this was linked to Vladimir Putin. So sure, there's going to be business dealings. In terms of collusion or treason, I just don't think that that's going to be as likely. And I think people, if they really bank everything on this, then they're kind of, I don't want to say setting themselves up for disappointment, but they're choosing to ignore the other guaranteed things that will stick. Like the emoluments clause to me is 100% foolproof. There's no question in my mind that he's in violation of the emoluments clause. And I do think that the Mueller investigation is important, especially if it uncovers some of this corruption and these business dealings, between Donald Trump and Russian oligarchs and potentially Vladimir Putin. But in terms of collusion and whatnot, I think that people they have kind of worked themselves into a frenzy, because what we see in mainstream media is that this really drives ratings. It's the mainstream media equivalent of YouTube clickbait, right? So it's you talk about things and you realize, oh, people really like this, so you talk about it more. And sooner but later, you're kind of in this situation where you have to talk about it because you created this expectation that something so big is going to happen that now you have to deliver. And I'm just, to me, my thing has been, look, just wait for it to be done and wait for the evidence to come forward. If Robert Mueller comes forward and he says, here's the evidence, this is what I found. That's when you can, take action and say, okay, this is definitely collusion or isn't collusion. But in terms of people kind of just trying to predict what's going to happen, it's just, you don't know the details yet, right? I think that the Mueller investigation has been phenomenal at exposing criminality with the indictments of Roger Stone, Michael Flynn, and whatnot. And I think that's good. So it's definitely been a net positive. But I think that, it's kind of being sensationalized, or it is being sensationalized because it's just a popular story right now. So yeah, I don't know if people are going to be let down. I'm not going to be let down because my expectations are, I always set my expectations low, right? Because people in power always seem to get away with whatever. So even if there's some type of corruption exposed between Donald Trump and Russian oligarchs, like will Robert Mueller want to pursue that, where anyone in American government wants to pursue that. So I'm always expecting the worst, but hoping for the best. But if the Mueller investigation leads to Trump being indicted, hell yes, I'm for it. But just people need to calm down because we don't know.
Part of the problem that I've always had with this, besides the fact that, I do think it's kind of dangerous to constantly poke the bear of a ex-KGB guy with nuclear weapons.
Yeah.
The other thing is, if the establishment, and I put Rachel Maddow in with Adam Schiff, I mean, they're all part of one little club, the media and the Democratic establishment. If they have been basically, been at a high octane 11 for 2.5 years, and what they've been talking about and screaming about doesn't happen, I actually think that gives Trump added narrative for the election to say, the deep state tried to take me down with this cockamamie, collusion or whatever he calls it, a hoax. And, Robert Mueller showed you it was all BS. And I think that only galvanizes his base. And I actually think it might pick off some other people that are kind of like all of this for nothing. And maybe they're giving him an unfair deal. What are your thoughts? Because I think it helps Trump if there really is no... Of course, they could find underlying things of inappropriate communication with his campaign. But if they don't have like a smoking gun, I think it helps him with his base and probably others.
I'm kind of conflicted on this because I don't really know. Donald Trump, in terms of at least like with his base, he can spin anything. Like if he gets indicted, he can spin it as, see, I'm proven right. Just because that's the way that Trump is, he isn't really attached to reality. What he says isn't attached to reality, and his base just eats it up either way. So I'm not necessarily too worried about him shoring up his base with this, but I don't know. It's hard to say with this, with this situation. I guess that I don't know how that would help or hurt him in the event this is overblown. I do think that the media will lose credibility if, these things that they've really alluded to, like treason charges, for example, don't come about. How hard will it affect their credibility? Will it affect it even, more than it already is? It's hard, maybe. It's just hard to say. I don't know. I guess I'm a little conflicted here, so it's difficult to give like a really cogent response.
Mm-hmm. I'd like to ask you totally left field about the media because, to me, and I promise you I'm not talking about this for a shameless plug for people to give me money, but for me, one of the main problems, and I saw this in 2016, was we're just outmanned. I mean, it was basically me on the campaign trail as far as independent media. I rarely saw anyone from Democracy Now! Or The Intercept or other places, not because they don't care, but, you need funding to cover a campaign in the field. And I think, of course, you could cover the campaign, the Jimmy Dores or you or Kyle, you don't have to be in the field. But I think that to counter the corporate propaganda that's going to be out there, it's difficult when you have kind of this Goliath, which is corporate media, but not really many independent, aggressive people actually showing, no, this is what Bernie Sanders voters need and want, and actually interviewing them, or Tulsi's voters. Like, you're not going to see that on CNN. The New York Times isn't going to do it, I can promise you. So what are your thoughts as far as, of course, it's the progressive wing versus the establishment, but I also think there's kind of that media, you need more independent media out there on the campaign trail, because to me, I mean, if in 2016, they didn't have time to prep for Bernie, so it was all on the fly. They've had years now to prep for Bernie, and there's going to be unprecedented propaganda coming at Bernie and Tulsi and Warren and name your candidate.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. It's difficult because we need more independent media voices. There's just not enough. Like there's 15 prominent independent media people, and that's simply not enough. But I mean, we are outgunned, like you said. They have more resources, and also one thing that we've kind of increasingly seen over the past year or so is that the barrier to entry for independent media is increasing. So now it's the case that you can't monetize your videos until you have 1,000 subscribers. Now it's the case that some of your videos may be demonetized. So some people may feel disincentivized and not want to talk about things like Syria. So it's getting more difficult.
I hate to interrupt you, but you should know 5 anti-war videos in a row were demonetized on Syria on my channel. Continue.
Yeah, no, I'm 100% with you, and I've noticed more demonetization lately as well, although that hasn't been my biggest issue. We've talked about this actually, I think, last year in February, where our channel views just fell off a cliff, like completely fell off a cliff. And when you have, thousands of subscribers, you should expect more than 100 views in, the first couple of hours, right? But it's just the algorithm changes are now making it so that way independent media outlets are getting buried. If you just go to YouTube's trending page, for example, do you ever see a Kyle Kulinski video? Do you ever see like one of our videos? It's always NBC News, CNN. So you're kind of seeing this amalgamation between, the independent media space and corporate media. They've kind of intruded on our space. And that in and of itself, just people seeing it who may have felt inclined to get involved think, oh, well, there's no way, why am I going to waste my time? It's going to be so difficult to, get involved. And even if I'm consistent and I work really hard, I could get beaten down by the algorithm and lose it all in 6 months. So we're kind of faced at this situation where we need more independent media, but it's getting difficult, more and more difficult to participate. And I always try to help and, signal boost for all these smaller content creators because it's so difficult to get started. But at the same time, long term, it's getting more difficult. And if we continue on this trajectory, then, it's going to be even more difficult. So it's, I don't know, man. It's tough. It's a difficult situation right now.
Well, it's interesting you said that because I'm one of those smaller people because I had to start all over. And what's funny is, we've done fairly well. I mean, I'm less than a year, and we're about to hit 27,000 subscribers. But
which is great.
Yeah, and it would have been way more knowing how YouTube works if we weren't being suppressed. But when I go on Jimmy's show, or I had Jimmy on, or I've gone on somewhere that's bigger name or more subscribers, all of a sudden you have like 2,000 or 3,000 more subscribers in like 2 days. And I look at the comments and it's all like, I had no idea you were back. I had no idea this even existed. And I look at that and it's like, wow, how do you compete if it's not that the content, there's anything wrong with the content, but people don't know it exists. So I think it's a big problem. And I actually hope more so that people start coming together in creative ways and, like you said, signal boosting. I mean, not only going on Jimmy's show, but having folks like you and Jimmy on and this and that brings some of their audience to check out our channel. So I think it's important. Last question. I see that I'm biased, but I see that most of these campaigns, and I think Bernie's one that could also do better in here. Obviously, you're looking primary to primary, but none of them are really talking about like Flint still doesn't have clean water for 5 years, or some of these pipeline fights. You look at Bayou Bridge down in Louisiana, Mountain Valley Pipeline, Atlantic Coast Pipeline, Line 3. I mean, the list goes on. Some of these domestic, local, progressive issues that I think if candidates started talking about, not just to like get people who are interested or activists, but actually show you're not just focused on big picture, you're focused on the day-to-day. I don't really see much talk about. I never see the DNC send out emails about anything of substance other than Russia. So what are your thoughts on, whether it's Bernie or whomever else, like what are some issues you want to see these candidates talking about on the ground level?
Oh man, there's a lot. I mean, obviously Flint, Michigan is one of them. We all have local issues that need to be addressed. In terms of like a national candidate dealing with that, I would love to see them really focus on certain local issues that really have a big impact and kind of speak to the state of the country. Flint, Michigan is a fantastic example, but there's more, than that. But it's part of the reason why I think that there needs to be like a really nationwide broad coalition of progressives so we can have progressives in elected offices like on the ground doing things about, certain situations, not because, you have to be locally there, to understand it, whatnot, just because we can't just have Bernie Sanders and like AOC be the only two people talking about these issues. So like, for example, Namiki Kantz, I brought her on my show. She's running for New York City public advocate. You know, we need people around the country who are elevating, you know, these issues and raising awareness about these issues. We need to work with diverse, you know, groups. We need to talk to people of color in their communities, LGBTQ organizations, and see what issues are affecting them specifically. So it not only needs to be like, you know, a nationwide focus to really show that this isn't just about, you know, a couple issues, Medicare for all, Wall Street, that it is about like individual people, but we need other people to get involved as well. So I really hope that what Bernie Sanders does is he kind of started to do this. Like he brought in Simone Sanders back in 2016 to start talking about criminal justice reform in the private prison system. I hope that he does this, but for like a range of different issues and whatnot, and local issues, and someone who, you know, can spread word about Flint, Michigan, because yeah, it's tough, right? There's so many issues. It's difficult to select, but in the process of looking at all of these national issues, because that's what's easier, these local issues kind of get ignored. And, you know, it's an unfortunate reality of us just trying to do a million things at once.
Right. Absolutely. Thank you for taking the time, man. Everybody can check you out at the Humanist Report. Obviously, you have a Patreon and all that good stuff.
All that good stuff. Yeah, it's all on humanist.report.com.
Cool, man. Thanks for taking the time, and I will see you next time I am in Portland.
All right. Thank you, brother. Looking forward to it.
All right. Take care.
Take care.
That was Mike. Ooh. That was Mike from the Humanist Report. I appreciate him joining us. You could catch him on YouTube at the Humanist Report. I think he does a great job, and I really, really enjoyed having him. Why do I look so yellow? Kind of look very yellow. Anyway, so the Super Bowl is tonight. I don't know if you guys watch football, but I know a lot of people do. So I'm going to end a little early today. Let's see where we're at. $41,665. All right. So I wanted to hit 42,000, but, you know, not terrible. 41,665. So thank you everybody who contributed. We're now at 741 people donating to our GoFundMe. So Ty and I are hitting the road next weekend, so we will be telling you more about that very shortly. Sorry for the technical problems earlier and all that, but we'll get the kinks worked out. Remember, you can become a member to Status Coup as low as $5 a month. Ooh, wrong thing. Hold on. You can become a member as low as $5 a month. We got, I think so far today, 4 new members. So I would love to get that number up. $5 a month, $10 a month, $20 a month, or you could do an annual at $147 a year. I will try my best to have great guests next week. It's tough to outdo Jill Stein and Rania and Mike, but I'll do my best. I have calls out to Rokana, calls out to Tulsi Gabbard, and calls out to a whole lot of people. So, Chris Hedges too, I've been trying to get on. And I got to reach out to a few other people the audience recommended. So I appreciate you guys watching. I appreciate you donating. Remember, the GoFundMe doesn't sleep. The GoFundMe does not sleep. So you could GoFundMe at any time. And of course, we definitely want people to contribute to our become a member at statuscoup.com/join. And remember, folks, before I end, I think you've seen it more and more. If we get more content from people like Jill Stein, if we get voices like Jill Stein, Rania, Mike, more voices out against imperialism, against oligarchy, against corporate capitalism, against corporate greed, against bought-off politicians, the more truth we get out there, the more people will understand and the more people will wake up. Because most people are not lacking compassion in this country. Most people have no fucking idea what the hell's going on. Peace out.